to address the Enbridge issue. Professor Quinn advised that he is unable to attend this morning, and in his stead will be Don McLean speaking for him. We have a delegation request from Richard Rebley to provide information relevant to the Enbridge pipeline issue, and we also have a delegation request from Matthew Nash respecting the Enbridge Line 9 pipeline. These requests can be added as item 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4. There are also delegation requests for future meetings. The first one is from Christine Gibson respecting the issue of accountability and transparency. A delegation request from Madeline Levy respecting commemoration and recognition of Raoul Wallenberg in the city of Hamilton. And we have a delegation request from David Adames, President and CEO of the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, who wishes to address the city's 2013 capital budget at the December 11th, 2012 General Issues Committee meeting. These requests can be added as items 4.5, 4.6, and 4.7 respectively. Also, with respect to item 9.1, which is a motion respecting the Enbridge pipeline Line 9 flow reversal project, there is an additional attachment that is attached to the changes. And there is an added notice of motion respecting proceedings to declare surplus property 50 Main Street East, Hamilton. And also the committee was distributed earlier this week with a private and confidential report on the proposed settlement of OMB appeals of development charges bylaws 09143, 09144, 11173, 11174, 11175. And this can be added as item 12.3 under the private and confidential portion of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a motion to approve the agenda as presented. I do hear tapping in Councillor McCaddy.
Chair, this is the appropriate time. I understand there's one more delegation. Gentleman was standing at the front just a moment ago, Mr. Elliott, and Ms. Montour, I believe from Six Nations, who were here at the previous time we discussed the Enbridge project, but weren't able to speak at that meeting.
That's fine. So you want to move for the inclusion?
If we can add those to the...
Okay, moved by McCaddy, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. Now motion as moved by Clark, seconded by Collins. All in favor? Carried. Are there any declarations of interest? Hearing none. Moving on to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, moved by Mayor Bertina, seconded by Collins. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to 4, we have members of committee. What is your pleasure with respect to the delegation request from Mr. Craig Foy? Moved by Clark, seconded by Mayor Bertina. All in favor? Carried. Members of committee, what is your pleasure with respect to the delegation request from Professor James Quinn, Richard Rebel, and Matt Nash? Moved by Partridge, seconded by McCaddy. All in favor? Carried. Members of committee, what is your pleasure with respect to the delegation request from Christine Gibson, Madeline Levy, and David Adames? Moved by Collins, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to consent items. Members of committee, you have before you consent items 5.1 to 5.10. Are there any items that you wish to have moved to the discussion agenda? I'm sorry, can you put your mic on, Councillor Clark?
Move 5.1 through 5.
Moved by Clark, seconded by Partridge. All in favor?
Carried.
Carried. Members of committee, we are now at the public hearings delegations section. Members of committee, we have several delegations who will be presenting today. I will now call on Susan McMaster to approach the podium to provide her presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Susan Mc... Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Susan McMaster. I am co-chair for Citizens Opposed to Paving the Escarpment. I am co-chair for Stop the Escarpment Highway Coalition. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My purpose for being here is to provide information to you on some recent events pertaining to the Niagara to GTA Highway. In regards to the Stop Escarpment Highway Coalition, that is a group that has been formed in the last 10 years. We represent people from Niagara to Brantford, Hamilton, Burlington, and now Vaughan. We are all very interested in moving people efficiently in the area, and we represent, actually 8,000 is short. We're actually more than that now. At this point, I'd like to congratulate this committee on some steps or stands that were taken on the highway issue, and I'll draw you back to September 2010. At that point in time, there was support raised in terms of options number 1 and 2. And I draw you, this is the actual grid of the process that the MTO put out on the highway. So for options 1 and 2, that was optimizing existing networks, the expansion of existing infrastructure. This committee expressed concern about group number 3 as it pertained to widening of the 403 through Coutts Paradise, and expressed concern, and the main reason I'm here today, on group number 4, which is a new corridor. The Stop Escarpment Highway Coalition has been working quite closely with Halton Region and Burlington Council on recent events on this. I've also been talking to some of our local councillors here as well, which I very much appreciate. In Burlington, we did hold a public meeting on this subject, which drew more than 500 people and a lot of interest. What we learned at that time is that the Ministry of Transportation has, in fact, put forward the recommendation for the next step on this highway. The recommendation has been submitted to Minister Chiarelli. In terms of feedback, we understand the Minister is less than pleased. We do not know exactly what that recommendation is. We strongly believe it is the original option C, which is the one that runs along the bottom from Ancaster through to the 407. What we have learned in our conversations with the Burlington Halton Group is that the Minister is putting off announcing the recommendation until 2013 at this point. I'm sure we're all aware of the recent political happenings at the provincial level. The Minister has also met with and discussed the current status of this process with the Mayor of Burlington, Mayor Goldring, as well as Regional Chair Carr. We believe that any highway option in this area, well, we know it, any highway option in this area is going to devastate Flamborough. We also believe we have something that shows the devastation a little better than what the Ministry of Transportation has shared so far. And I'll point out again, the route we think is still on the table. I'll also point out it doesn't matter the route. Every one of them is going to devastate Flamborough. It's just a choice of exactly where. We are still actually quite concerned about this whole option of a highway here. We don't believe it does anything to address our current issues at hand. We've studied these reports for close to 10 years now. We found them to be severely flawed, antiquated, and misguided. We don't believe the right question has been asked yet, and the right question is, how do we increase mobility in the GTA? This information is from Metrolinx. This is congestion right now. I'll point out to you that in the area where this highway is going, down in the corner there in the Bay of Hamilton, it's not too bad. So I'll take you 25 years in the future. This is how it looks in 25 years. Visually, we're mystified at how the highway will relieve that congestion in the GTA. If anything, it will further impact it. We have an issue with a process that took place in isolation rather than considering factors as a whole. Those other factors include things like the area in Flamborough, demonstrated by Don. We commissioned a natural capital study that values the services from that area in this city at $1 billion, actually just shy of $1 billion annually. We think that deserves to be factored into this whole process. We think congestion in the GTA deserves to be factored in, and it hasn't. We also believe that this highway will devastate the agricultural area in Flamborough. It's interesting to know that agriculture, again, another big industry in this area, stands to be an even bigger industry given impacts of climate change as they progress. And in this process, it's called community. So we're talking about something that is a life-sustaining element. If we were hungry, I think we'd have a great appreciation for the food we grow around here, as if it's a community thing or perhaps a social tea. We think it delivers or needs a lot more consideration, and we think the turnaround economic viability to this city deserves that consideration as well. We are in the process of putting forward a submission to the minister. Something interesting that has happened in the back and forth with the Halton Region Group is the minister has not only said, I'm not happy with what I'm seeing, he said, give me a recommendation. I want to see alternatives. Ironic, since we've been providing them for a few years, but we'll do it again, and we're putting it together now. I will share that our alternatives are going to include rail, light transit, high-speed or LRT. They're going to focus on rail in trying to ease that congestion in the GTA. And we're going to suggest they literally stop the EPA process now. Stop it at number 1. Take number 2, end phase 2, off the table. Basically, I've fulfilled what I wanted to do today. I wanted you to know that there is a lot happening on this. More coming in 2013. But I'd also like to say, as a group, our organization has enjoyed a good relationship with the cities of Halton and the region of Halton, City of Burlington. We haven't had as much interaction with Hamilton, and we would actually welcome that. And I will just leave that on the table for you. And I thank you for your kind consideration.
Thank you, Susan. We do have a few questioners, and Councillor Partridge and McCaddy. Councillor Partridge?
Thanks very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Welcome, Sue. Nice to see you again. I guess, so I have a few questions for you, but have your group actually met with the Minister Chiarelli?
No, we have not.
Okay. Have you met with any staff?
Of the ministers?
Of either the ministers or MTO?
The MTO, when we had the Cogeco TV show we put together and whatnot, we actually did invite the MTO staff to come out and talk to us. They didn't at that time. They declined. The minister did tape an address. In regards to the last time we spoke to the MTO staff, that was when they made a presentation to the regional Halton Council, and we were at that point, and we did have a meeting with them afterwards.
Okay, and thank you for that. I was invited to the Cogeco. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, but I certainly appreciated the offer to be there. And I guess, so my only other question is, we have had, Councillor Pasuta and I, over the past year and a half, we have had 2 community meetings on this specific subject. The one in Carlisle, there was close to 200 people there. You were there yourself doing the presentation. And following that, we brought a motion forward, which was unanimously supported, that the mayor sent a letter and in talks with the minister request that Flamborough and North Burlington Escarpment be removed from the study area. So that's been done. What has changed since we did all that?
Actually, what has changed since then is that the minister has received the recommendation and he has asked for further input.
Okay, thank you.
And
I-
that is slightly different than anything we've ever had as a feedback before.
Okay, and that's important, so thank you for clarifying that. But I thought I also heard you say you don't know what those recommendations are at this point. Is that correct?
I am surmising, and that is based on the interactions and the feedback I've received from the regional chair Carr and Mayor Goldring, based on their conversations and staff, and just in terms of, it's a highway. I really don't know which one, and you're correct. And we did ask to meet with the minister as well. The minister did decline to meet with our group. But he's not prepared to release that to us until 2013.
All right, and I think that's important for everyone to know as well. So you did request that meeting. You did
Yes.
get declined.
Absolutely.
I'm a little bit concerned, though, about surmising any kind of recommendations until we actually know what facts we're dealing with. But I do encourage the work that you're doing, absolutely. You know, there are challenges right now with the proroguing of the government and everything else going on.
Can I just respond to that?
Chair? Yes.
The request has come from the minister now, so we are looking to respond now.
The request for what, sorry?
The request for alternatives has come from the minister now.
And was that request made directly to your group?
That was made to the region of Halton and Burlington.
Okay. Thanks very much, Sue. I really appreciate all the work that you do and continuing to work with you folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Partridge. We now have Councillor McCaddy.
Thanks very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thanks very much, Sue and Don, for coming here this morning. This is quite alarming to see the options that travel through Hamilton, through Flamborough. All three options are devastating. The ones to the south, Mr. Chair, along the Niagara Escarpment, and the ones further north through the wetlands in Flamborough, the provincially significant wetlands. So I guess I think we're all a little bit confused because we haven't heard of this, heard of the updates from city staff or anyone else here at the City of Hamilton. So thanks for making us aware of this, Sue. But I just wanted to, Mr. Chair, just to understand the process that has occurred to date, because it sounds to me like the top political officials in Burlington Halton, the mayor of Burlington and the regional chair of Halton, have met with Minister Chiarelli at the province, and that is sort of our current source of intelligence. Yourself having had discussions with the mayor and the regional chair. And that's where you're drawing your conclusions to date. Is that right, Sue?
That's
that these
correct.
three options are the ones that are on the table?
The information we've drawn to date are from the chair and Burlington mayor, and I believe the date they met was October 27th.
So we don't know, as Councillor Partridge pointed out, we don't know for sure what's in this report. It's been kept by the minister until 2013, I guess, sometime when he decides to release it. Again, the intelligence from the regional chair and the mayor is that the minister is not happy with the MTO and the way that they've formulated this report, which I think is good news for us, given the three options that would devastate the environment in Hamilton, Flamborough. So I guess, Mr. Chair, the obvious question, I think, is that where is Hamilton in these discussions? The minister has decided to meet with Halton and Burlington, and in fact, the impact on Hamilton could be quite a bit greater than it is in Burlington and Halton. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you at the appropriate time, either to city staff or Mr. Mayor, perhaps, what is our understanding from Minister Chiarelli or other sources at the province?
Jerry?
Through the chair, we tried to get the MTO to come in October, November to come in and present the findings. They weren't able to do that, so we're trying to still set that meeting up for the MTO to come in and talk to council.
We have an unofficial through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to Mayor Bertina.
Deputy Mayor, topic not discussed with the minister. I mentioned to him that there's continuing discussion around the GTA, and he nodded in acceptance of that. So my anticipation for this council is that we'll, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, wait until we receive the information. Forward, it'll be an outline of how they may intend to progress. And until we have new information, we're still based on our old information and our council direction, which we passed. That still stands. Our council direction would be the document, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that we have in terms of our council's dealings.
Councillor McCanny?
So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, it seems to me that we need to meet with Minister Chiarelli and at least have the same level of knowledge as our colleagues in Burlington have, Burlington and Halton. I'm a little uncomfortable that they seem to know more than we do. And if I'm Burlington, I say eliminate that bottom route and send it through Flamborough. That's my comment as the mayor of Burlington or the regional chair of Halton, because that actually gets me off the hook in terms of the environmental impact in Burlington. So I'm not sure we want to leave it up to Halton and Burlington to take the lead on this. Of course, they're good colleagues of ours next door, but I think we need to represent Hamilton in this. And if they've already met with the minister and made their views clear, I would suggest we need to do the same. Thank you.
Okay, I believe we have now Councillor Clark and then Councillor Pasuda and Partridge for a second time. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Susan, good morning. Thank you for attending today. Just some questions for clarification more than anything else. So what I heard you say is that you were told that the minister stated that he was not happy to his own staff in front of other people.
No, that's not what I said.
What did you say?
What I said is that the minister has indicated, and my information comes from those meetings through the Burlington, that the minister is not happy. Whether or not he has said that in front of his staff or not, I have no idea.
So was it a public meeting?
No, it has not.
So where did he state it? Which meetings? Trying to understand where, because it's unusual for a minister to make that kind of comment.
It is.
Understand exactly where the comment was made.
The comment
Brad,
was made.
We can barely hear you. I'm not sure if it's your mic or because you're not
I
close
have a
enough.
sore throat. I'll get closer.
Okay. Okay, so can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
It's very unusual for any minister to state that they're not happy with something that their staff is doing in any public forum or to anyone that could become a public forum, let alone in an EA. So I'm trying to understand where that statement came from.
Okay, Susan, do you have an answer to that?
I can respond to that. I'm fine to respond to that. And that you're absolutely right. It is not normal, which is a big reason why I'm here right now. You are correct. I am relying on third party. I'm relying on Regional Chair Carr, and I'm relying on Mayor Goldring. That I am relying on that. I'm also taking into account what happened on the GTA West, which is where they were looking at a new corridor and part of that process, and that's been reduced to a widening of the 401. And that is at the same point with the EA process. So what we're seeing overall is some opening for movement here, which is another reason why I'm here. It's abnormal that we have this opportunity to present. This is no longer about the terms of reference and the technicalities pursuant to deciding about this highway. This highway was decided to go in 10 years ago, and the world's changed drastically since then. This is now political. This is, exactly, thank you, because it is. And it's about, give me something else. And we do need something else. It's a good question.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, you indicated that it's unusual for the minister to ask for alternatives from politicians?
I don't know if he asked it from the politicians. I think, you know what? He posed the question to politicians who have staff behind them. I think it's unfortunate that the alternatives weren't presented by his staff.
Councillor Clark.
Okay, but his staff did the entire environmental assessment through a public consultation looking at a number of things, and suggestion is that the minister is asking for alternatives from Halton and...
I think Susan acknowledged that it's hearsay more so than...
I clearly acknowledge it's hearsay in third party. I will also point out every option up there is detrimental to Hamilton. even if it's the
They're not
other.
officially asking for alternatives, Susan. That's, I think, the point that's being made.
You know, my point is, and we're on different sides, you and I, on the issue, but be careful what you're hearing, because right now it's pure politics. And they're not being, with the greatest respect, Minister Shirelli has indicated to numerous people that a decision won't be made until after 2013, 2014, which is long after the next election, which is a problem. And if you recall, if you look at the original EA, the needs assessment, and then the completed EA, everyone was excited when the highway was off the table. And yet the Premier and the ministers never once said publicly, clearly, the highway is off the table. As a matter of fact, it's in the document after a 25-year period. And so you've got a situation where the facts are in the document, and we're relying on politicians to try to speak honestly and truthfully, and there's a great deal of political spin going on. So if I was in your position, I'd be here and I'd be on guard. But I'm not sure what the hell the truth is anymore.
What I do know is this isn't the answer to anything we're facing today. So,
With greatest respect, this council thought the highway was a great thing for this city.
I recognize
Continue to think so.
that council has had an opinion contrary to mine.
Okay, so let's,
Thank you.
on that point, we have Councillor Pasuta next.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Marula, and welcome, Susan. And you are a constituent, a resident of my
Thank
ward.
you.
So have you out today, and I know it can be a challenge at times being here in front of council in the gallery. So a couple quick questions and a comment too, but Don faded away there. I see he's rolling it up now. That's okay. As we look here at this map, and for me, it's devastating to see the routes through Ancaster, rural Ancaster, and up through Flamborough, and as you said, significant wetlands, recharge areas, and in between all that, fine agricultural lands. Years and years and years ago, they widened Number 6 Highway. What is the county line between what was Wentworth at that time, now City Hamilton, and Wellington County, and it ended there. Instead of coming up and around through the wetlands, making its way to the Hanlon to join to the 401, it just ended, and it's a bottleneck down there. And talk again of moving forward with that. Has there been any talk that you know of actually increasing capacity on Highway 6 up to the 401, including making the new route through the what I call the wetlands there in Wellington County to the Hanlon? Because you've got on that map there, and Mr. Deputy Mayor, on that map there we have where it comes to Highway 401, three access points on there.
I just want to be clear.
Well, we have 3 access points there, and I'm looking at, and then you got the Number 6 Highway where it goes up between the first 2 to your left there.
I can't answer all of those directly for you. My understanding is the route on the far left, closest to the Brantford border, I believe that one's off the table. There was a communique issued by the MTO on that particular route.
So that one is off, okay. And you've heard no talk of making Highway 6 wider than to the 401?
Well, there's been discussion around that. As it pertains to this particular recommendation, I don't know.
And I think one of the issues here is trying to get through, as Councilor McCaddy knows very well, is through the Coots area. And that's true. Burlington has been on the forefront more than we have been about this issue. It hasn't, for me, to be honest, it hasn't escalated to the point where I think it's highlighted enough in the news, since it's come back on board here, enough to put a lot of political pressure on. Mm-hmm. And my feeling is if we have a change in government, and whoever it should be, back in when he campaigned before, it was a big pressure to put the highway through, and that would also increase the fact and the point that we may have a St. Mary's Quarry maybe back on to So, I mean, we've messed up here over the years as far as planning our cities. And expanded. Binbrook is way out there. It's a new city within its own. Waterdown is there. We have not done the proper planning that they've done in Europe to use public transportation. in your eyes, the way we have developed the city of Hamilton with building all over the place and spread out, what's the best way, in your mind, for the future to have a transportation to Toronto and beyond?
The first thing, from our group's perspective, the first thing is to actually focus where the big priority problem is, which is however, as I said as well, Councillor Pasuta, we are putting together what it is we want to see. We've done a lot of work on it so far. I'm not ready to share that at this point. When we actually have a submission and some clear ideas on that prepared, and we have meetings on the go with other interested parties, I'm happy to share it with you.
If I may. And I've heard lately the high occupancy vehicle lanes on the highways are not working like they should. There's talk of making them strictly for buses. What's your comment on that about the high occupancy lanes?
You have to be able to get to where you're going. So if you're taking the GTA West-East lines, or the West-East line out of Burlington to Toronto, that's absolutely doable. If you happen to be going further north to Toronto, you simply don't have the option to do it. If you want to get people in the high occupancy lanes, that's great if you can get people to commute, and you do see more and more of that. But the bigger issue is to give people an option to get them off the roads in the first place, relieve the congestion, up the number of trains we have, up the speed. And the one thing too, and we say focus on trains, and that's because a lot of the data we're looking at right now, one is a recent study in the States, indicates that the younger generations are actually driving less. They are looking for these options. We really don't have them here. As we're moving towards Toronto, if you have to be someplace, you have no choice but to drive. I go to Toronto too, and I love it when I can take the train. So more trains, faster trains, but people like trains too, oddly enough, but they don't like buses. KW, Waterloo, they actually did a study, and they were getting, oh no, I want my car, I want my car. Then they went, they started talking to the younger generation, but they found out people like trains. And for whatever reason, there's that delineation, and they don't mind taking a train. So that's where we see this, whatever shape and form a train is. And I'll also remind you, economically, one of the concerns Council did present was the cost to service the infrastructure that would be the result of sprawl. It's a lot cheaper to build trains. If I'm sitting in a farm out in the fields, I actually kind of like the sound of a train going by. Don't like the buses so much. And I'll also advise, even the Pembina Institute recently, I guess it was 2011, did studies in regards to the particulate matter, the impact from trucks and cars, and how it is such a major impact on carbon emissions, and how trains, rail, that whole bit, not only does it pay respect to what we're doing to the future generations and the impact that that's having cumulatively, it will help relieve what's going on in the GTA. And it's not that we have trains everywhere. I don't expect a high-speed train from Rockton to downtown Hamilton. But what I would like is that hub. Let me get to the hub, and then I am happy to get on a train and sit on my computer till I get where I need to go.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Don and Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pasuta. We have Councillor Partridge and Clark for a second time. Councillor Partridge.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Sue, I have a question, and then I just have a comment that I'd like to make. My last question is with regards to the MTO staff. Have they been in the past year and a half to present to Burlington Council, to your knowledge, or to Halton Region?
I saw them at Halton Council Chambers, and it was either August or September.
All right, so they have been in recently, and they have talked to Halton Region.
They have.
So I think what I would like to do is I will follow up, hearing from our General Manager of Public Works, Jerry Davis, that they are working to get MTO to come in. I will work with Jerry to see if we can move that forward. And I'll also follow up again with Councillor John Taylor. I meet frequently with the Burlington councillors, and we have spoken about this, but not within the last couple of months. So I think it's certainly worth the effort to do that. I am concerned, though, when some of the information that you have been relaying to us is hearsay. and coming from a third party. So it's not factual information. And I'm really want to caution anyone around the table to make any decisions until we have that factual information in front of us. So I do appreciate you coming in, and Don as well. Those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, Susan? Did you want to respond to that?
There was no question.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Partridge.
Thank you.
Now we have Councillor Clark and then McCaddy for a second time.
Oh, one of the other aspects that was early on dealt with, and then one of the provincial ministers squashed it because of cost, was doing tunneling so that there's no damage to Flamborough, Burlington, and all the rest of it, much like they do in Europe, so it could come out much further down the line. Has your group ever looked at that particular concept as an alternative, since if they're talking about alternatives, it is one of the ones where the train, everything could go under the tunnel?
That's based on the premise that a highway is needed from Ancaster to the 407, and I don't abide by that premise, which goes...
Where's the train going to go?
Where's the train? When we're...
To go train. We need freight train. Most of the highway traffic is trucks right now. It's logistics.
Actually, that's odd because, in fact, what happened at the MTO presentation in Burlington is that the councillors very hardly questioned the MTO on their data pertaining to goods movement. And what came out of it is that it's very anecdotal. They don't have any reliable data. And in fact, council was adamant that they had overstated it and weren't really buying those facts either. So at that point, they asked the MTO staff to go back and look at that more closely.
The MTO that did that.
It was John
Really have the data because it comes over the highway and we track it the entire time.
Metrolinx has been very clear on that. The data in regards to goods movement is not that good. It's highly questionable, and the backup is at the border, which of course brings you to the whole border issue about which do you use, Niagara or of course Windsor, which they are expanding.
I think we should have the MTO in here. Include Mr. McQuaig. Let's really get down to this, and I'd enjoy the questioning of them.
No problem. Thank you.
Are you moving that at the appropriate time? I'll accept it now. Moved by Clark, seconded by Partridge, that we invite Mr.
Metrolinx, Mr. Bruce.
Okay, Madam Clerk. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And Councillor McCaddy.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify the hearsay comment, because I'm not sure I understand. I thought I did, but let me just clarify. Sue, it seems to me that the source of this information that you're providing, the information I'm referring to, is that the minister is displeased with the MTO report, and the interactions with the minister come from directly from the mayor of Burlington and the regional chair in Halton. So I suppose that's still hearsay, Mr. Chair, but I would suggest higher quality hearsay if we're qualifying hearsay.
Okay,
those are. I wouldn't expect those two politicians to lie. You never know, of course, but is that indeed where the source of the information is coming from? Because they're the only ones who have met with the minister on this topic, at least in this room.
Okay,
today.
Susan, perhaps you can just confirm who said what and where.
The source of the information is the regional chair, Mayor Goldring. And may I also suggest they did issue, there was a press release issued. They tweeted, there was actually info released by them after the meeting in the public realm.
Make an official statement then, accordingly.
Regional Chair Carr. So again, not the minister, Regional Chair Carr, Mayor Goldring.
I think
Okay,
it's probably
Councilor
important
McCaddy.
for us to receive that information if you have it, Sue, or we can pursue it through other channels, the press release, that sort of thing that followed up. And Mr. Deputy Mayor, I chair the Bay Area subcommittee we've established with Burlington, and I'd like to add this item to the agenda at our next meeting, which sounds like it won't be till January. We're having a hard time connecting with calendar schedules, but I'd like to add this item to that particular agenda. Thanks.
Do you want to move that accordingly? Okay, moved by McCaddy, seconded by Farr. All in favor? Carried. Madam Clerk, you good with that? Excellent. Councillor Bertina. Mayor Bertina, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Mayor and members of committee and Susan, it should be understood that there are lots of transportation groups that are having all the trucking industry and others who may be having conversations that are leading people to assume that some government policy is in place. The trucking industry will never give up on having this highway put through, and so I think we need to be really careful, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that this chamber deal with hearsay and what third parties may say about what other people say. I mean, we've all been victims of that ourselves, and I think the matter is fairly clear-cut. We have a position. Ministry has an official position right now, and there's new information coming along. So once we get that information, because remember, the information is not going to be, guess what, they're building a highway. So we've got lots of time to discuss the situation, and the reason for this little presentation is to suggest that there are plenty of conversations going on about such a highway, and they may not necessarily be official MTO or ministerial ones.
Thanks, Mayor Bertina. And Councillor Clark for a third time.
I just wanted to thank Susan for coming in with the new information. We can find out what the facts are. We're really good at that, and we make our decisions based on those facts. Partisan political comments that become seen as reality, we don't tend to deal with those things. We narrow it right down to the facts, and that's how we make our decisions.
I appreciate the opportunity, and when you have gotten more facts, I'd look forward to coming back and talking about it some more.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Councillor Clark. So moved by Clark to receive the presentation and seconded by Councillor Partridge. All in favour? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, before we hear from Enbridge, I will ask the delegations to approach the podium to provide their presentations first. And we will be waiting for Don McLean, who will be speaking on behalf of Professor James Quinn. That's correct. Good day, Mr. McLean.
I'm the fill-in guy today, as you sort of kind of figured out here. Dr. Quinn wasn't able to attend. He has given me his notes and his slides, and I hope that I can fairly represent them. You'll remember that I was in here before speaking on the Enbridge topic before, and I primarily was talking about climate change. A few things have happened since then, particularly Hurricane Sandy, that has focused some attention on that. Dr. Quinn's, let me get some glasses on here. The slide is of the Enbridge cleanup still ongoing after 2 years. The July 2010 spill that took place in the Kalamazoo River in Michigan. I think the bill is somewhere around $820 million at this point, and the EPA recently ordered the company to go back and do more work on it. His comments here is just the Enbridge pipelines have failed and will continue to fail. The Polaris Institute used Enbridge data to tally 804 spills between 1999 and 2010. 168,645 barrels of crude spilled into the environment, more than half the oil spilled by the Exxon Valdez spill. And the toll on flora and fauna, including humans, is not clear but is substantial. The costs are real, the risks are high. The benefits go to big oil corporations and to those exporting the oil and gaining added value. And that slide is from the tar sands specifically. This is the route. And if I've got my notes straight, the risks are ours, the benefits are short-term to oil companies, the costs are long-term and global, and one of those costs will be displacement of coastal peoples of the world. So the red is line 9 on this map, the orange part, yellow-orange part, I can never get color straight, down to Portland is not been formally identified, but is apparent that in a previous application by Enbridge to their Trailbreaker application to export through Portland, Maine to markets abroad. So Dr. Quinn has pulled out this item from January 2011 on sea level rise, a peer-reviewed study published in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, Physical Engineering Sciences section. And he has highlighted a section from that, which probably is worth reading, based on our analysis, a pragmatic estimate of sea level rise by 2100 for a temperature rise of 4 degrees centigrade or more over the same time frame is between 0.5 meter and 2 meters. The probability of rises at the high end is judged to be very low, but of unquantifiable probability. However, if realized, an indicative analysis shows the impact potential is severe, with the real risk of forced displacement of up to 187 million people over the century. That's 2.4% of the global population. And that's the line that he particularly wanted to emphasize, the real risk of forced displacement. We are, as in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, talking about abandoning portions of New York at this point in New Jersey as a result of what took place there and what is likely going to keep on happening. This is just a slide from the Australian Scientific Organization on the various model projections for the expansion of the ocean. You can see they're quite varied, but that 0.2 meters in the pink bar is at the lower end, 0.2 to 0.6 from thermal expansion, glacier melting. Contributions from potential ice sheet dynamic processes add some more, and larger values cannot be excluded. This is just last week from St. Mark's Square in Venice. If you haven't been swimming in Venice recently, you can do it on the streets now. You don't have to go in the canals. Sorry, I'm jumping by here. Thing does not want to do what it wants to do. Here we go. How far back will it go? There we go. So he's ended off this presentation with an illustration on the Milgram experiment. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Milgram experiment. It was done in the early 60s, and it was an attempt to try and determine whether people who were saying that they did something evil because it was ordered for them to do it, whether they would actually do it. And the expectation at the time was virtually everybody will refuse to do this. But Milgram set up an experiment where two students are taken and they are given the role of either teacher or student. The teacher is instructed to give electric shocks to the student when the student makes a mistake, and to increase the electric shock quantity as more mistakes are made. The expectation was that students wouldn't go very far with this. In fact, they went all the way to the maximum in most cases. It was a shocking experiment. It was a suggestion that we are very susceptible to following orders and doing things which somebody in authority is telling us to do. What Dr. Quinn suggests in terms of an analogy, and he suggests that this is an imperfect analogy, but he says the voltage was to be turned up with every wrong answer until the student, actually an actor, got to the point of having a heart attack after pounding on the wall, separating teacher and experimenter from the student. Most teachers kept ramping up the voltage despite the grave apparent impacts on the student. He suggests you can go online to get more details on this. But the council could claim This is the suggestion he has in terms of how this situation is set up, that on one side we have federal government, which is in charge of all these issues, the one who has jurisdiction over pipelines and so on. They are the experimenter, the one controlling the overall. City councils, the National Energy Board, the Ministry of Environment, other public officials are in the position of being the one who's supposed to administer the electric shocks to the coastal peoples of the world. And what he's suggesting is we should have moral fortitude and say no, that this is wrong. And that's the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Councillor Clark has a question. Councillor Clark.
How would you describe me?
Well, I'm not sure how Dr. Quinn would describe you. I think what he's suggesting is that City Council is in the position of being told that they don't have any authority over decisions like this, which are clearly having impacts on a global scale, and that you should just keep on doing what you're supposed to do, which is getting out of the way, in this case, keeping things moving along. And that his argument would be that you have a moral duty to look at this picture from its full features and respond to that from a moral perspective.
Feel free to tell Dr. Quinn that I find his analogy of the milligram experiment rather simplistic in this that we're dealing with. I do have a lot of questions for Enbridge when they come forward, but I do want to thank Don for coming forward on Dr. Quinn's behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. No further speakers. Thank you, Mr. McLean. Appreciate your time. We have a motion to receive the presentation moved by McCaddy, seconded by Morelli. All in favor? Carried. Next is Mr. Richard Rebel to provide information relevant to the Enbridge pipelines issue. Welcome, sir. The floor is yours.
Is the mic on?
It is indeed.
Okay. Just for the record, my last name is Rebley. If you could imagine it had
sorry.
It's all right. If you could imagine it had a Y at the end of it, right? I don't always mind that mispronunciation, Rebel. Sometimes it's useful. It's just today I don't feel like one.
The floor is yours, Mr. Rebley.
I'm going to start with my conclusion first. It is this, that the General Issues Committee needs to explore every avenue it can to protect Hamiltonians from potential catastrophes caused by Enbridge Incorporated in connection with the flow of diluted bitumen through Line 9, part of which runs through environmentally sensitive rural lands of Hamilton. The way I arrived at this conclusion was by examining some of Enbridge's verifiable actions and inactions, starting with a spill from its Line 10. This is a pipeline that runs from Hamilton to Buffalo. This happened in Binbrook in 2001. According to a Binbrook resident, John McGreal, who is present today in the peanut gallery here, it took 12 hours for the company to shut off the flow. That pipeline, by the way, was only 29 years old, much younger than Line 9. That is an important point. The next spill on my list was the rupture of Enbridge's Line 6B in Michigan on July 25, 2010, my thinking being that surely Enbridge had learned something in the 11 years since 2001. I would like to stress that the 2010 spill need not have happened if Line 6B had been properly excavated and repaired in 2005, which was when Enbridge first discovered corrosion and cracks along the 43-year-old pipeline. It didn't. What did happen was that Line 6B ruptured, spilling 1 million gallons of diluted bitumen from the tar sands. The tarry bitumen contaminated 38 miles of the Kalamazoo River and sickened approximately 320 people, resulting in the evacuation and eventual purchase of 160 homes. according to a Hamilton activist, the late Maggie Hughes, who recently made a power presentation to Council on this same topic. Some of those who sickened subsequently died. In July 2012, the United States National Transportation Safety Board, which I will herein refer to as NTSB, concluded that Enbridge, 1, took advantage of weak regulations, 2, tolerated a culture of deviance on safety, and 3, failed to detect and properly respond to the largest and costliest oil pipeline spill in United States history. When the pipeline ruptured, the company failed to respond to the emergency with either adequate manpower or proper spill containment methods. Instead of concentrating at the source of its spill, initial responders used booms nearly 8 miles downstream. As a result, more oil contaminated more wetlands and waterways, resulting in an $800 million cleanup, or 5 times more costly than any other accident. At the beginning of the emergency, Enbridge used the wrong spill technology at the wrong place and at the wrong time. It did not have adequate response on site, nor did local responders have access to Enbridge's response plans. Due to a series of repeated errors in Enbridge's pipeline control room, the NTSB described the entire disaster an example of an organizational accident due to team performance breakdown. In fact, the company had a 10-minute rule that mandated that operators shut down a line showing a dramatic drop in pressure. But during the Michigan leak, operators systematically violated or ignored company rules as well as pipeline warning systems so many times over 17 hours that NTSB had to conclude that the company's control room suffered a culture of deviance. One of the things I'm concerned about is the lack of learning, said Chairman Hersman of the NTSB, which is a much milder statement than I would have been inclined to use myself had I been in that position. After Enbridge's $800 million cleanup, pipeline lobbyists bragged that the company had scrubbed and polished the Kalamazoo River so thoroughly that the company had left the river cleaner than before the spill. Despite this claim, the United States Environmental Protection Agency saw fit last month to order Enbridge back to the site of the oil spill to clean up remaining pools of bitumen contaminating a 38-mile stretch of the Kalamazoo River. The $800 million spent over the 2 years it took to clean up 1 million gallons of oil, that's 200,000 more than Enbridge originally reported spilled, was apparently not worth doing the job properly. And thus, my conclusion, this committee needs to explore every avenue it possibly can to protect Hamiltonians from potential catastrophes caused by Enbridge Incorporated in connection with the flow of diluted bitumen through Line 9. And that is the end.
Thank you, Mr. Rebly. Are there any questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion? Motion to receive, moved by Pearson, seconded by Pasuta. All in favor? Carried. We don't have quorum. So we'll have to wait to receive your presentation, but we can move on. Many thanks, sir, for your time.
Thank you, folks, and have a good day.
Okay, moving on, we have Mr. Matt Nash respecting Enbridge Line 9 pipeline. Welcome, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Is there a way that I can move this forward? I think there's a few more pieces just at the end of my presentation, if it could move forward. Thank you. This is your presentation? I can use this. I have the same last endpoints.
Do you have a limit on here?
No,
needs to be voted on.
I know this presentation, so I can that up. That'd be great. All right, sorry about that. Good morning, honorable councillors, concerned citizens, and Enbridge representatives. My name is Matthew Nash, and I'm speaking on behalf of Hamilton 350 and Environmental Defence, who stand in opposition to Enbridge Line 9 reversal based on three things: the type of oil to be pumped, the worn, though yet unknown, condition of the existing pipe, and finally, Enbridge's reputation for oil spills. First off, the type of oil to be pumped through the pipe will be dilbit. Dilbit is more dangerous than light crude for three reasons. It is much more viscous. Viscous means that it's thicker. Dilbit will have to be forced through the pipe at much greater pressure. This greater pressure is further multiplied by the increase in pressure Enbridge demands for output. In fact, it's 40 to 70 times more viscous than conventional crude oil, and greater pressure will equal more spills. It's also necessary to dilute dilbit with toxic substances to help it flow. These include natural gas substances and volatile petroleum products. It's 20 times more acidic than conventional oil, 10 times more, and there are 10 times more sulfur content, according to the NRDC. Why is this bad for a spill? Well, the mixed bitumen and condensate separate in a spill. Bitumen sinks to the riverbed, which is 10 times as hard to remove as crude, while the toxic off-gassing condensate permeates the vicinity. The toxins included with dilbit are benzene and hexane, which can affect the central nervous system. And as my last presenter said, it has detrimental effects to human health, flora and fauna. It's also abrasive. Tar sands oil includes, as you may presume, tiny shards of sand that act like sandpaper, which gradually wear down the pipe with its abrasion and heat. In fact, although newer, Alberta's pipelines suffer 16 times as many corrosion spills as other pipelines in the U.S. Additionally, the pipe is almost 40 years old and on its second reversal. This pipe is old, and yet we still have no independent analysis of the integrity of the pipe. Can we trust a company to report defects that has a direct interest in not reporting any defects? Which brings me to my last point. Enbridge is a company with a reputation for oil spills and environmental devastation, the most recent in Kalamazoo on their Line 6. Enbridge dumped 1 million gallons of tar sands crude in the spill over a span of 80 kilometers, the costliest spill in American history. Citizens were left with toxic water, health problems, and a destroyed environment that is still being cleaned up. Do we sacrifice Lake Ontario, as well as all the infrastructure we've invested in to ensure clean, accessible water to Hamiltonians? I'm talking about the water treatment plant upgrade, Coots restoration, and plans for Randall Reef remediation that would all be jeopardized by a spill in Hamilton. This endeavor will not create jobs for Hamiltonians. They will not be building a new pipeline up to code, yet we will have to foot the bill for the inevitable spill. If you don't believe all the risks associated with the pipeline operated by Enbridge, I would like to leave you with a summary of the independent U.S. government investigative agency, the NTSB, which my last presenter so eloquently put. In its report, the NTSB said that not only was Enbridge's response to the spill slow, 17 hours and 19 minutes, but the company knew at least 5 years before the massive leak, the pipeline was corroded and cracked. External corrosion and cracking caused the 471-kilometer pipeline to rupture, the NTSB said. 15,000 defects were identified in a 2005 report, but only 900 of those digs were actually 9,000 of those were actually dug up. 900 of those were dug up. The report added there were pervasive organizational failures at Enbridge, and Enbridge twice pumped more crude, about 81% of the total release, after the pipeline ruptured. So after the pipeline ruptured, Enbridge tried twice to kickstart it again. And they did, and that was 81% of the total release. It's not only Enbridge that's at fault, it's our lack of regulations that are in place. I'm speaking to the regulations in the United States, but as we all know, with climate scientists being fired, environmental assessment being neutered and pretty much taken off the books, we have need to worry as well. So I'll leave you with this. Delegating too much authority to the regulated companies to assess their own risks and correct them is tantamount to the fox guarding the henhouse, Mr. Hersman said in her closing comments to the NTSB report. Enbridge's plan would drive us to accept all the risks of the spill with no benefit, and that's the wrong choice. So Line 9 should not be reversed. So this is what you can do. I think we should send a letter to the MOE requesting environmental assessment because it crosses the watersheds critical to the water supplies in Hamilton and the rest of southern Ontario. We should share this letter with other municipalities to request solidarity among municipalities. I attended a Line 9 information conference last weekend, and the big message was solidarity. Right now, as it stands, most people don't know about the Line 9 reversal, and they know nothing about the risks. Enbridge is trying to force this through as quickly as possible before there is a front to stop it. So we have to move forward to gain solidarity with our other municipalities and send a strong letter to the MOE requesting an environmental assessment. I believe there's only 2 that can happen per year, but this is something that we should explore all avenues. And finally, do what is morally right. And the information that I've gathered in this presentation was from a number of sources. If anybody is concerned that I'm not dealing with facts, I can certainly forward those to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nash. We do have questions, and Councillor McCaddy.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thanks, Matt, for coming this morning. I think it's going to be very important for Council to get the facts. You've outlined some facts today, and Mr. Rebele referenced the NTSB report as well. And the motion that I'm going to move later on builds on the previous meeting we had here on this question, on the pipeline question, and has posed some questions to the National Energy Board talking about pipeline integrity, questions of whether dilbit is in fact more corrosive than the standard crude oil, and things along those lines. And I'm not sure the National Energy Board is going to respond to Hamilton. Well, that's probably a bit of a question mark, but nonetheless, we'll need to assemble that sort of information in order to be able to speak with intelligence on the issue. And speaking to Mr. Rebele's last comment, if we're about protecting Hamiltonians and Hamilton environment, and we should be taking steps in that way, we need to do that with the facts. So, Mr. Chair, I'd certainly ask you, Matt, and perhaps Environmental Defence, to please send that information to us. The NTSB report would be important, I anticipate, and other materials that you may have referenced today, or maybe looking at some of those questions that we'll be posing to the National Energy Board. Enbridge will have some thoughts on those, of course, being in the business. No doubt you will as well, and there may be university professors and studies out there that we're not aware of. We're city councillors dealing with umpteen million issues. Our city staff are not experts in the pipeline area, so we are going to rely on Enbridge, groups like Environmental Defence, National Energy Board, and others to become informed. So certainly feel free to send as much information, Mr. Chair, as you'd feel is appropriate to assist us in our decision making here.
Great. I wholeheartedly agree with that request to inform Hamiltonians in general, but most especially the councillors who can make these critical decisions to stop Line 9 or at least assess the potential impacts in our community. And before I go, I'd just like to comment on what Mr. McCaddy just said about characteristics of dilbit, its viscosity, and also the amount of sediment in, which causes abrasion. I'm almost positive that Enbridge is going to use their own facts, which are derived from this paper, which I can send to you as well. This is prepared by the Alberta Innovates Technology Futures. It's quite a long paper. It looks official. It's not peer-reviewed. It's not scientific at all. And in fact, it says that although there are reasonable efforts to make this work conform to scientific principles, it makes no representation and warranties with respect to the reliability, accuracy, or validity, or fitness of the information, analysis, and conclusions contained in the report. So this is the information that you'll be getting from Enbridge is basically for entertainment purposes only. It's not scientific. And also the people who funded this, which says that dilbit is not corrosive, it's not abrasive, and it's not thick as sludge. The people who funded it are these two people, Eric Newell, which served as the president of Syncrude Canada for 14 years. Sorry, he was the CEO, and Kathleen Sendall, who's the vice chair of this organization, was the president of Petro-Canada, the natural gas division. So their facts are going to differ, but I urge you to think carefully about who's actually telling the truth and who has more to gain, and vice versa, who has a lot to lose by not knowing the truth. So I'm going to do my best to inform, to the best of my ability, city councillors and Hamiltonians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nash. May I have a motion to receive Mr. Rebley's presentation and Mr. Nash's? Moved by Collins, seconded by Morelli. All in favor? Carried. Many thanks, sir. I would now call on Ken Hall, Senior Advisor, Public Affairs, Enbridge Pipelines Incorporated, to approach the podium to provide their presentation. Sorry. Oh, my apologies. We have the additional delegation, Councillor McCaddy moved, and his name being Councillor McCaddy? His name? Oh, there he is. Welcome, sir. Can you just state your name for the record once you get to the mic? Welcome. The floor is yours. If you can just state your name.
Okay, my name is Iwatne Hitne. I'm Haudenosaunee, Husnageta, Scory. Most people know me as Wes Elliott. Okay, I would like to start first that the honor of the Crown is at stake here. And anything that happens with Native people, especially with the Confederacy, the honor of the Crown is at stake. And that includes here. And one of the things that in dealing with honor, it is not proper to lie, especially to your city council in these papers here. And I specifically point out to a lie that's out here, read in the conclusion. It says, outlined above, no project-specific concerns have been raised so far from our stakeholders and Aboriginal communities. That is a bold-faced lie. Last year, our Confederacy, through HDI, the Haudenosaunee Development Institute, sent a letter to the NEB outlining our concerns. And that's a public document that is on their website and that has been forwarded to Enbridge. Outlining it. It was a 3-page document, and I will forward it here for your concerns so you can see it too. But it outlines in 3 pages our concerns concerning this project. So, honor of the Crown and honor and lies right before you, I'm telling you that's a fact. And so this is a bold, blatant lie that they gave to you, period. Now, what I'm suggesting here is that this council here has experience and has set a precedent in dealing with our Confederacy. You have the Red Hill Valley Agreement that was negotiated between Hamilton and our Confederacy. So the precedent has been set. What I'm going to suggest is that this council deals with our Confederacy again, concerning your concerns and concerning our concerns on this pipeline so that we can formulate a plan together. In return, you also have concerns concerning contaminants at the airport, that you're having problems getting funding from the feds. We can help in that too, because we have the 1701 Treaty. Now, the 1701 Treaty was confirmed in Ontario courts in 2008 with the Ireland George case versus the Crown. In that case, the judge specifically states that that specific treaty, as outlined in 1701, is recognized under Section 88 of the Indian Act, that it is a valid treaty. Being that it is a valid treaty, they also stated that the treaty supersedes Ontario legislation. Those are key points on there. So the opportunity for us to work together, not only on Enbridge, but also on the contaminants at the airport, is real. And I suggest that we start looking forward to planning on working together to do this. And I also would like to thank Enbridge for putting all this information outlined in here, because it outlines all the municipalities that we could work together with, okay? And we're looking at this council helping in that way, and in doing so. You look at what's happened in British Columbia. In British Columbia, the municipalities have partnered with the Native communities there. Why isn't it happening here? We have an opportunity to start working together with our municipalities, your municipalities in this area, and with our Confederacy. Now, also it states in here that they have talked with the Iroquois Caucus. Now, the Iroquois Caucus is a collection of band councils. They are not traditional. They are not the Confederacy. They have had no talk with our Confederacy. The last update I had was Saturday. And they had no contact with our Confederacy through the HDI. None whatsoever. So that's the updates that I have to give to you. But the possibilities are real for this council to once again work with HDI and our Confederacy to do something positive, of coming up with a plan concerning Enbridge, and to come up with a plan concerning your funding. We can work together, and that's what we want to do, is start working together. So I bring this idea to you and present this idea to you as possibilities. We have many possibilities that we can work together on, and that's what I'm looking forward to, is working together with you and our Confederacy on the possibilities that we can move forward. I'd like to turn this over now to Ruby.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello. I think I'll pull us down quite a ways. It's always that way. Well, my name is, what is it again? I'm thinking of my Mohawk name, Nagotala, but my whatever name is Ruby Montour. I'm a Mohawk, and we have been going to different places, and we've been fighting against all the stuff that's been going on in our territory. And we would like to let this gas company, oil company, know that we're aware of what they're doing, and we don't like it. We look at the reserve, however you say that name, what is it? Okay. Have you ever seen what they've done to them? Well, you got grandchildren or children, do they go outside with a mask on to play so that they can breathe? That's what's going on up there.
Oh, sorry.
In Sarnia. They've got the pipes surrounding the reserve to the place where the animals that they have always used for food cannot get through. And when they go out to get them, they taste badly. The air is horrible to smell. Cancers is outrageous in our community. Is that what we deserve? I say this way. The disaster that can happen from this oil being reversed is catastrophic. It's going to be a horrible, horrible mess. And it's not just going to affect us. It's going to affect everybody. This is why we all need to really stand up and say, this is enough. Our life is worth more than their money. They can't buy our health. They can't buy the happiness of our families and the communities. We have a right, along with you, to live in a healthy manner. Now, these pipes are old. They're old. And they're willing to jeopardize us so that they can make more money. They don't care how that's going to affect us if anything goes wrong with those pipes. And you can be sure that something will go wrong because they're not supposed to do it that way. I think that if we stand together, and I want these people to know, really know, that we are paying attention to what you're doing, and we don't like it. And if you think we can't do anything about it, you are badly mistaken. Because yes, we can. We're tired of being walked over, and your idea is pushed on us whether we like it or not. But we don't like it, and you shouldn't like it either. The wildlife is paying for all of this oil. Only a few of them are taking the bucks to the bank. Well, the rest of us go on a wing and a prayer that nothing will go wrong. If we got a backbone, it's time to use it. And it's time to let these people know this is not acceptable. And they need to come at us with a different view. We have people who are following this closely because of the abuse that's going on these other reserves. And when I say abuse, I mean abuse. Send some of your people up there and take a look at how those people live. They're right in the middle of all those pipes. The odor is terrible. I'm mighty sure you wouldn't want that for your family. So why should we? Maybe they think the Grand River is so bad off now that nothing can save it. They could be right on that one. But they're still not going to do it. And we want to be informed. There's people on the reserve who have never been informed about what's going on. Then they put in here that we've been informed. They take 6 nations and they ball it together like a snowball. There's more entities to us than that. And there's a great deal of us that have never been consulted in any way, shape, or form. And that better be reversed. They can reverse that. We'll allow that. They're going to deal with us one way or the other. They can either make it in a nice way or they can make it in a hard way. It suits me either way. Thank you for having us. And I think that when we open up our eyes to what's going on around us, the destruction that can happen, and the destruction that's already going on in some of the nations of the natives. It's already happening, and it's not far away. I hope that you will investigate this thoroughly, because we really need you to do that, for the sake of your people as well, and for all the people up and down the Haldimand track. Thank you.
I wish to add a second comment on here, and that is we are looking at peaceful ways of doing things. As we know, what happened in Caledonia, that was not peaceful, it was violent. There is the real possibility that violence could happen over this because the Haudenosaunee people will not permit this to go through without proper consultation and accommodation. They will not. So the real possibility exists that violence could erupt somewhere along this line. I'm here to say that I want peace and I want to protect my people. And I would like to see us have the opportunity to work together with this council, other councils along the way, that we can work together in a peaceful way to show that peace is the way that peace can be done. So I just want to remind you of that this is a real possibility and it's peace that must prevail. Thank you.
One more thing, please. All these places that of the nations that have been that's on here that have been written here that they've been informed about what's going on. I plan to get a hold of them. I plan to get a hold of the Mohawks and see how they feel about this. They weren't called warriors for nothing. So we'll find out how they feel, and we'll find out how truthful they actually can be, which is probably nothing I'm going to be surprised about.
Also, too, is the band councils do not have any representation over our land or over our treaties. The 1701 was made with our Confederacy, not with band council. The Iroquois caucus is all band councils. They have no authority towards any land or towards any treaties, none whatsoever. Those other communities, Iroquoian communities that they have contacted, all run through the Iroquois Confederacy. They're all members of the Iroquois Confederacy. And the traditional people will have a voice. And you should be remember, too, that in our community at Grand River, we have a band council also, too. But it's only 5% of the people vote. Only 5%. That's 95% of our people don't vote for that system. We are a traditional government. We've been there. You've dealt with us. You have agreements with us. So keep that on your mind, too. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion? Oh, before you do that, Councillor
Thank you, Deputy
Clark,
Mayor.
and then Councillor Collins.
Just want to first off thank our brothers and sisters who we have worked with very closely on a number of projects for the last decade. And I know the staff in Hamilton, the councillors, and the citizens have learned a great deal. I know I've learned a great deal in terms of who you should be speaking to and what's the proper process. I have to confess I'm a little bit naive at the moment, and I'd like to ask a couple of questions if you don't mind. As I understand it, the 1701 treaty that you're talking about with the Iroquois Confederacy, that was the NANFA treaty? That's the one we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And I know we've worked in terms of bilateral discussions and working together as a group under almost like a memorandum of understanding between the Confederacy and the City of Hamilton. Have you ever worked, or has anyone worked with the NANFAN Treaty where they would have a friend of the court with the Confederacy? So if you're going to be challenging something in court under NANFA, normally it's the Confederacy that would do that work. In this case, it sounds like you're suggesting that there's a possibility that Hamilton could be a friend of the court and work alongside the Confederacy. Is that what I'm understanding, or did I misunderstand?
That's what I'm looking at. Further talks along that line would be very beneficial. I cannot make any statements here, as far as HDI concerned, but I'm looking forward to opening up those talks between this council and our Confederacy.
Now, may I, Deputy Mayor, also ask, has the Confederacy determined, there's a number around us that are looking at the proposal by Enbridge right now and the 40-year-old pipe, et cetera. Has the Confederacy looked at possible responses if that pipe was ripped out and brand new pipes with brand new equipment was placed in? Have you contemplated that at all, or is that something that we would have to have those discussions with the Confederacy at the time?
At that position there, it would be up to Enbridge to enter into talks with our HDI, yes, which they have not. And so further speculation as far as what may be done is fruitless at this point until negotiations have started.
So to be clear, though, because I read through the responsibilities of the National Energy Board and the act that created it, the proponent, in this case Enbridge, through the National Energy Board, has an opportunity to, in essence, pay tariffs to landowners like yourself for the pipelines going through and the nuisance of it. That has not been contemplated with the Confederacy at all?
Nothing has been contemplated because no talks have been entered into at all.
They have not contacted them.
Thank you for your time today. It's been very enlightening. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And as you know and Council knows, I've had the privilege of serving on the Joint Stewardship Board with our Haudenosaunee neighbours for the last number of years. And I think, as Wes and Ruby note, our strong relationship that we've had with our Six Nations neighbours and Haudenosaunee neighbours is due in large part to the strong lines of communication that we've had between our two communities. And I think it was Wes, through your presentation, where you suggested that we might want to meet with the Confederacy, the Confederate Council and chiefs and to discuss not just the pipeline issue, but I think we have a number of issues that we share between our two communities, whether it's the Mid-Pen that was here this morning. Of course, we've dealt with Red Hill. We've been very successful with Councillor McCaddy's efforts as chair of the Conservation Authority to talk about hunting rights in the Dundas Valley and how we resolved that issue, which was an issue that involved not just our Haudenosaunee neighbours, but the entire City of Hamilton community. So I think we have a strong track record of working alongside our neighbours, and I think Wes' suggestion of maybe meeting with our neighbours in an informal setting, maybe a night between or an afternoon meeting between our council and the Confederacy Council, I think might go a long way to maybe flush out some of these issues that have been raised today, not just with the pipeline, but as I just mentioned, there are 3 or 4 other issues that we've dealt with over the years with a successful conclusion to many of them. I think, Wes, your idea is a good one, and I would like to formalize that if we could. Maybe if we can direct Mr. Murray, who has a good relationship again with the chiefs, to contact our Haudenosaunee neighbours to set up an informal meeting between our two communities and sit down and speak to them about these issues and others that might be on the horizon as well. So if I could at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
So moved by Councillor Collins, and actually this is the appropriate time, so moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Clark. All in favour? Carried. Thank you very much, sir and ma'am. And may I have a motion to receive the presentation moved by Partridge, seconded by Pasuta. All in favour? Carried. Now I would like to call on Mr. Ken Hall, Senior Advisory, Public Affairs, Enbridge Pipelines Incorporated, to approach the podium to provide their presentation. Accompanying Mr. Hall are Graham White, Manager of Corporate Communications, Trevor Grams, Director of Integrity Management, Scott Ironside, Director of Integrity Management, Marjorie Folks, Senior Counsel, Regulatory Affairs, and Franz Pruger, Operations Supervisor, Westover Terminal. Welcome, everyone. The floor is yours.
Our presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Deputy Mayor, Mr. Mayor, members of committee. On behalf of Enbridge Pipelines, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. I'm sorry. Okay. To speak to you here this morning. As has already been identified, I have a number of my associates who have traveled from Calgary to participate in this presentation today. I would humbly request that the committee consider providing Enbridge with additional time so that we may provide you with a thorough discussion of some of the topics that have been raised here this morning. I understand that due to policy constraints, and I do understand the constraints of your agenda, that we have been asked to hold our comments to 5 minutes. However, if it would be possible for that period to be extended, we would certainly appreciate it.
I personally have no problem with it, and I presume Councillor McCaddy, you're going to move that, seconded by Councillor Jackson to allow for that. All in favour? Carried.
And the button, here it is.
That's right. Now you have 6 minutes.
You should say how long.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think they'll be reasonable in their approach.
I would like to begin by providing just some quick overview facts on the stature of this project and the scope of what this project consists of. The slide behind me obviously is an indication of the kinds of concerns that can be raised and often come forward when a pipeline company such as Enbridge announces a project like the Line 9 reversal and the capacity expansion for our pipeline. I'm trying to keep these comments brief because I really believe the focus of our discussion this morning needs to be on the integrity of our pipeline and our assets. It's certainly been challenged here this morning. This pipeline project revolves around the idea of transporting Canadian crude to Canadian refineries located in eastern Canada. The pipeline will carry predominantly light crude at the request of our shippers. This particular project services the needs of 3 refining companies in eastern Canada: Imperial Oil, which is located at Danacoke, Suncor, which is located in Montreal East, and the Ultramar facility, which is located across the St. Lawrence River from Quebec City. These shippers have asked us to send them a variety of crude oils, but their predominant demand to this point has been for light crude, not diluted bitumen. The pipeline application, which we will file to the National Energy Board at the end of this month, will be worded to allow Enbridge to ship a variety of crudes, light, medium, and heavy, which by definition would include diluted bitumen, to provide flexibility moving forward to service the needs of our customers. All of the shipments of oil received on our pipeline system must meet criteria set forward in our tariff agreements. There are conditions imposed by the National Energy Board on the quantity of contaminants, if you will to use that term, that can be present in the oil. We have heard that there are comments made that this oil contains sand. This is not the case. Such impurities must be removed from the oil prior to introduction into the Enbridge pipeline system. We are talking about transmission lines, which are main lines used to transport crude products to refineries. These are not gathering lines located in the oil sands in in Alberta. So to use a term that these crudes contain sand simply is inaccurate. Nothing is more important to Enbridge than the integrity, the safety of our assets. Nothing is more important to Enbridge than the safety of the communities through which we operate and the environments through which our pipeline passes. This is job one for our company, like it is for all energy transportation companies. We continue to upgrade and maintain our assets. We do not feel that the age of Line 9 is a particular point of great concern. If we maintain our assets in operating condition, the age of the pipeline really becomes irrelevant. It's not about how old it is, it's about how well you take care of it. As has been mentioned this morning, there is an indication to you that there will be an increase in pressure on this pipeline. This is inaccurate. There will be no increase in the maximum operating pressure of Line 9 related to the reversal of the project. The product will not be heated in the pipeline, as has been mentioned in previous media articles that have circulated. There is no intention to change the operating temperature or pressure of Line 9 associated with this project. And in fact, we are returning the pipeline back to its original direction when it was first put into service in 1976. This pipeline was constructed at that time and the mandate of the Pierre Trudeau government to provide Eastern Canadians with access to Western Canadian crude because of the pending oil embargoes that were taking place with offshore oil producers during the 1970s. The pipeline was reversed in the mid-1990s as offshore oil production ramped up and became cheaper for Eastern Canadian refineries to purchase. We are now seeing market conditions where the exact opposite is the case. The differential price on a barrel of Western Canadian crude versus offshore crude is about $25 per barrel. So to use the example of the Suncor refinery in Montreal East, a represented savings of $1.6 million a day for that refinery could be achieved through greater access to Western Canadian crude. The reality is that this provides a level competitive marketplace for refineries located in Eastern Canada who are currently operating at a reduced competitive, from a reduced competitive spot in global markets. So again, Enbridge is in the business of transporting energy. We're doing this to meet the needs of our customers, to maintain the longevity of the refineries located in Eastern Canada. I would now pass the podium over to my associate, Mr. Trevor Grams, who is the director of our Integrity Infrastructure Program, who will address some of the issues that have been raised about the integrity of our pipeline. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir, and welcome to you, sir. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I will try to be respectful of your time this morning. We have distributed a very large presentation document. I'll go through what I believe are the most focused points within the integrity area, and then I'm sure we'll have ample questions where we can explore other areas of concern. First of all, covering the facts around corrosivity. There has been lots of claims with respect to dilbit being more corrosive than traditional crude oils. That has not been substantiated through our information. Corrosivity is normally tied back to the level of water in the oil, and certainly water is more common in our gathering system pipelines up to a 50% level. However, in our transmission lines, our regulations and the parameters we set for our assets keep that at a 0.5% limitation for a combination of both sediment and water. And those are the two factors that predominantly lead to internal corrosion in the pipelines. We have been transporting crude oil since 1968, and we exceeded the 100,000 barrels per day threshold back in '86 with dilbit. So we do have lots of experience in transporting that product. We have not experienced an internal corrosion failure on our mainline system. So contrary to some of the other information that you've received, that has not been found to be the leading cause of a release incident. And back in February 2011, just as a reference, the Alberta Energy Resources Conservation Board released a statement that diluted bitumen is as safe to transport as crude oil. In addition to that, NACE, which is a North American corrosion engineering organization, is dedicated to the study of corrosion, has more than 16 studies dating back over 20 years to address internal corrosion within pipelines, and none of those studies found any evidence to determine that diluted bitumen was more corrosive than conventional crude. In addition to that, through PHMSA, who was under order of the U.S. Congress, has been asked to pursue an additional new study for the corrosivity of diluted bitumen. Those results are expected in 2013, and that work is being performed by the Academy of Science in the U.S. Studies and evidence clearly demonstrate there's no more risk of corrosion in pipelines carrying diluted bitumen than conventional. I think I've made that point clear. And certainly we have plenty of experience, as do some of our other peer companies, with moving diluted bitumen in pipelines. How do you manage corrosion in pipelines? I think it's important that we share some information in that respect as well. Corrosion can be both on the inside of the pipe as well as on the outside. Inside being caused by moisture and solid content. And how do we explore, how do we control that corrosion should it exist? First of all, tight constraints that all products shipped on our pipelines go through laboratory testing to make sure they're absolutely within the ranges provided and contractual arrangements with each of our shippers. In addition to that, if there are any risks of contaminations in the lines, we use cleaning pigs to move any impurities that are found in pipelines, or if a line is stagnant for any period of time, we run cleaning pigs to make sure nothing's developed in the pipeline during that period. In addition to that, we can also inject corrosion inhibitors into pipelines to reduce any impact if the line is in a stagnant mode. For any period of time, the corrosion inhibitors, again, reduce any potential impact of corrosion on the inside of the pipe. We also have cathodic protection and coatings that control and resist the external areas of the pipe to corrosion. In addition to that, like all good pipeline companies, we continue to pursue and invest in advanced new methods and technologies for the detection and management of corrosion, as well as any other threats to our pipeline system. As my colleague Ken has already mentioned, pipeline safety and the safety of public and the workers and the protection of the environment are our top priorities. We continue to work towards a goal of 0 pipeline incidents, and we recognize there has been incidents in the past, but we continue to work towards a goal of 0, and we have made several significant improvements since the July 2010 time frame to continually show growth and improvement in our systems, the control of our pipelines, and the methods we use to move energy safely. Our pipeline system is also closely monitored by a state-of-the-art control center located in Edmonton that operates on a 24-hour-a-day basis, 7 days a week. Over the last decade, we've transported over 12 billion barrels of crude oil safely delivered with a record of 99.99%. We've used that information in past presentations as well. We continue to deliver and strive to have 100% safe delivery of all of our products and ensure that we have the prevention of all spills. As mentioned, the Marshall, Michigan spill of 2010 highlighted the importance of the goal of 0 in both our pipeline and our facility integrity programs, and we reorganized some functional areas to create greater focus to ensure that we have responsibility for both the pipeline and the facilities along the pipeline. According to the NTSB final report, I think this is important to note, internal corrosion did not contribute to the release. Following the Marshall incident, Enbridge has also substantially increased our integrity management spend, and dollars don't necessarily aren't the most important thing, but I think it is one of the things that people look for. Are you properly investing in your people, your systems, and the methodologies to control your business to protect you against future incidents? And we have increased that spend substantially. For inline inspections, we are now running 175 inline inspections have taken place since the beginning of 2011, and nearly 3,000 pipeline inspections or excavations during that same period of time. I'll talk specifically here in a few minutes about Line 9B, the reversal project. 15 of those 175 inline inspections have been conducted on Line 9B itself. Just in general, our integrity management system, our approach, we start off with planning, so that determines the inspection criteria and also the frequency, the mitigation requirements of what we need to do and what threats we look for. Every line is specific. We implement that by following through on the inline inspection activities, and then followed up as well by doing field inspections. Most people will call those dig sites, where we actually go out and physically investigate the pipe at different locations. We assess the performance, so we do a comparison of what we find in the field directly as well as with what we find with the inline inspection tools. And we continue to look for opportunities to improve, both ourselves as well as with the vendors we use to support our business in inline inspection, and the analogies and the algorithms they use to interpret the data they receive. Inline inspection, it is a highly sophisticated industry. I want to draw a comparison to what we're probably more familiar with, which things like an MRI. In days gone by, the best you could receive was an X-ray. And then technology kept improving and improving, and now it's amazing what you can see with an MRI as far as the human body goes. Well, that same technology is applied in pipelines. So through the series of different applications of ultrasonics, magnetics, we are looking for corrosion on the inside of the pipeline, the outside of the pipeline. We're looking for any potential for cracking circumferentially or longitudinally. We're looking and capturing all the data around any dints that the pipeline may have, as well as whether the center line of the pipeline changes from one run to the next run. So has there been any stress or settling or erosion that's caused movement of the pipeline between ILI runs? All of that data is collected. Every series of data is compared to a previous set of data. So you get not only the absolute of the number, but you get a comparison to what you've seen in the past. So that's an extensive amount of data collection, and it takes an advanced set of knowledge to understand and interpret. So that's why we use the best of the companies that are available in industry, support us through what we call master service agreements, and we have those enabled with all the major ILI vendors in North America. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of value in repeating inspections, so we do repeat inspections on intervals that allow us to understand whether there's been any changes in that pipeline and its condition from one inspection period to the next. In some cases, the tools will see a feature that we require further inspection on, and we call that a feature of interest. When we find a feature of interest, we then go into the field and actually do a formal dig and excavate the area. We'll remove the coating and expose the external of the pipe and do a direct assessment of the pipe using handheld tools and methodologies that have been in business for many, many years. We'll then compare those physical measures as well back to the ILI information we've already received. Through that analysis, we'll then make a determination whether what we found is what we expected or not, and we do what we call unity plots, where we compare all the data we receive from the ILI to all of our physical data and look for a one-to-one comparison or unity. That gives us greater clarity and greater knowledge as to whether or not the science of the inline inspection tools are working properly, and they are detecting the features and sizing each of the features appropriately. Once the pipe is excavated and exposed, then a decision is made as to whether or not the pipe needs to be repaired or mitigated in any way, and in some occasions we'll apply a sleeve, which is a welded additional piece of pipe on the outside of the pipe. Normally we go joint to joint, so that's a 40-foot or longer section of sleeving on the outside of the pipe to completely encapsulate an area if we have any concerns. So in essence, you've made the pipe wall significantly thicker in that area. And then the pipe is recoated using the latest coating technologies in those areas. All of those dig sites are normally processed through local permitting processes, and certainly in partnership with the landowners where those dig sites are located. Specifically on Line 9B, as I mentioned before, we've run 5 different ILI technologies or inline inspection technologies in that section of pipe from Northwest over up to Montreal. They include crack detection through ultrasonics, calipers, which is the geometry, as well as it gives us what we call the center line of the pipe. So if we understand if that center line has moved from one inspection to another, we know that the pipe has shifted. And 3 different corrosion technologies, magnetic flux leakage, axial flaw detection, and ultrasonic wall measurement. We also do what's called data integration. So we look very carefully in trying to understand whether there's a crack that overlaps with where there might be a dent or a crack-like feature, whether there's a corrosion pit that's in a dent. So we also look at each of those data sets independently and then cohesively to see whether or not any of the features of interest are acting upon one another. We also look through the data for each of those tools to see if each of the tools sees a particular feature differently, and that further expands the knowledge and the use of those tools and further enhances the use of the science. The number of excavations on Line 9B have not been determined yet. We have run the 15 runs already on Line 9B. They've taken place mostly in the last 8 to 10 weeks. And we're now just starting the process of receiving the data back from the ILI vendors. And that will take a number of months into the future. We anticipate you'll start seeing the excavation program associated with 2012 ILI runs starting in January 2013. Any digs that have happened in 2012 would not have been associated with those ILI runs for 2012. They would have been associated with ILI runs of previously runs. That really concludes the big part of the integrity presentation. We've got a number of slides and lots of information in the package, but I think it's probably an appropriate time to close off there and then open it up for questions.
Thank you, Trevor. Any questions at this point? We have Councillors McCaddy and then Clark. So Councillor McCaddy and then Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. And first off, I want to thank Enbridge for coming today and bringing the expertise that they've done to Hamilton. It shows a lot of respect for the City Council, and I for one, greatly appreciate your deputations today. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to begin by talking about the process, because I think it's always important for us to, as we decide how we're going to respond or intervene or take action of some type, we need to understand the process so we don't miss any opportunities. So I have a motion, as you know, Mr. Deputy Mayor, later on, and attached to that is a letter from Enbridge to the National Energy Board dated October 11th, 2012. And this letter was sent to me by the Environmental Defense Organization. I think Matt spoke on their behalf earlier on. So I just wanted to understand the timing of this and what the letter says, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So I don't know who would be the best person to answer that, but I'll pose a couple of questions if I can. So first of all, the intent of what type of oil will be flowed through this pipeline. And I understand, and it's important for us to understand that Enbridge is not the oil company here. Enbridge is the organization that would carry the product. So it's not entirely their decision on what product will be flowed through the pipeline, but based on their conversations with their customers, and looking at this letter, which I take as a heads up that they're going to come back to the National Energy Board and apply for additional flows. I think they refer to it as a pre-application information. What can you tell us what type of oil will be flowed through the pipeline? Would be question one. Specifically, obviously, the concern is dilbit, and then the timing of the application that you'll make to flow the heavier oil, and it's all language, but I think I'll just call it dilbit for argument's sake, and then the additional barrels per day that will be flowed, the application will go through. So just a sense of timing, Mr. Deputy Mayor, the type of product and the timing of the application that will go into the National Energy Board, please.
Who would like to answer that question?
Okay. I'll try to address your question around product first, and then I'll let one of my colleagues address the process. From the information that's been provided to Enbridge from our shippers, there is the application will include a range of products, as Ken Hall has already spoken to. They said it's predominantly the lighter crudes, but the application will include the ability to ship diluted bitumen on the line.
And Mr. Deputy Mayor, it may not be a fair question, but I'll ask it anyways. in fact, do you have confirmation? Can you confirm that dilbit will be flowed through this line? Diluted bitumen, Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Can you confirm that?
It will be in our application. So, and our products quality specification will include the allowance for that. So at the end of the day, then it's the shippers that actually nominate volumes on a daily basis out through a month and through the year, but they actually nominate it in batches. So I can't tell you specifically how much will flow each day or each week or each month, but the application will allow for diluted bitumen to flow in the line.
Thanks for that. So the process question then, I guess, we have this letter before us today, the October 11th letter, and I think I heard Ken say that there'll be an actual application going in at the end of November. So maybe just to confirm that. And Mr. Deputy Mayor, this council is not familiar with the National Energy Board process, and that's part of my motion to ask staff to investigate that, but I suspect Enbridge is quite familiar with the National Energy Board process. You're in that business. So I wonder if you could take us through that process. When will the application be put in? What type of application is it? And how would the National Energy Board treat that application in terms of process? And of course, our interest today, City of Hamilton, should council decide to intervene? What an intervention by us would mean. How long do we have if you put your application in the end of November or whenever you tell us it will be going in? Just a sense of the process, please, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Yes, we will be filing an application with the National Energy Board at the end of November. We filed this pre-application information for the NEB's purposes so that they could start the process for their own internal purposes, so they knew what was coming and they could start the process running for things like participant funding. The National Energy Board process, we will be filing an application pursuant to what is called a Section 58. It's an application for facilities. All the work will be done on station property, and with the exception of some work on a densitometer, but the work is all being done on station property. The process will be that once the National Energy Board receives the application, they will make a determination on completeness of the application. That's within their timing. Once we make our application, everything is within their power for timing, and we have no influence over that. They will make a decision on the completeness of the application, and after that, they will issue a hearing order. The hearing order is a document that contains information about the issues that will be discussed. There's a minor description of the project. It talks about the scope of the project, and it talks about the process that will be followed in the consideration of this application. We fully expect that they will set this down for an oral public hearing. They don't legally have to, but we are fully expecting that. If they do set it down for an oral public hearing, there will also be an opportunity for participant funding. They will issue a letter that, and also publish in newspapers so that people that want to apply for participant funding may do so. Participant funding is available to non-governmental organizations, Aboriginal groups, landowners, not-for-profits. It's not available for governments or industry associations or for-profit organizations. The hearing order will set out all the steps, and one of the steps will be that people that want to participate actively in the hearing can file an intervention. And there's a form on the NEB website that you can use to just check off the boxes and give your contact name. Once you file an intervention, you have full rights to participate in the hearing. You can ask written questions of Enbridge. You can file evidence. You can come to the hearing and cross-examine any party in the hearing. And you can present argument at the end of the hearing. The other way of participating is by writing a letter of comment, and that can be written and filed with the board, and the timing for that will also be set out in the hearing order. There may be an opportunity for oral comments at the hearing. I don't know. That's up to the board to determine whether they want to allow that. After interventions are filed, then there will be the process just quickly, and I've set some of this out in our slides, but the process will be that Enbridge will file any additional evidence which based on what the board listed in their list of issues in the hearing order. Then people will be able to ask us information requests, which are written questions that they can send to Enbridge. We will respond to them. Interveners then file their evidence. Then there are information requests to the interveners, responses to those, and then we end up at the oral hearing where there's cross-examination and argument. The board will then reserve its decision and issue it within about 12 weeks, usually. That's their service standard, of the date of the end of the hearing.
Thanks very
on
much.
That point, just point of clarification. I presume you're Marjorie.
I'm sorry, Marjorie Folk. Yes, okay. F-O-W-K-E.
Council Regulatory Affairs. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yes,
Councillor McKenzie. Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So thanks very much for that. A very comprehensive answer. So it sounds like the clock starts ticking when the Energy Board goes through the check to make sure everything's complete, and they issue something in the newspapers often, by the sounds of it. And how do we get on a list to be notified that we've got 60 days or 30 days or whatever the number is in order to intervene and put our step into the process? And I appreciate because it's something that we don't know.
Sure. The NEB will advertise for participant funding, and then as part of the hearing order, they will order us to place ads in the newspaper all along the right-of-way with respect to the hearing and the process for the hearing. And so we will do that in both languages all along the right-of-way of the pipeline. We would be happy to add you to a list to make sure that the City of Hamilton gets a copy of the hearing order when it's issued. But there will be there will be ads in the newspapers.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, that's very important that we do be added. I guess Mayor and all members of Council probably would be the letter to address, and that would come to Council. And because we didn't receive a copy of this October 11th letter directly, and it'd be nice to have that so we have it directly. That'd be great. Thanks very much. That's the questions I have on process.
Okay, and if I could, sir, your staff, I've put a lot of links in the presentation for where to look for information, and the National Energy Board's process is generally a information pull rather than information push. So everything is on the NEB website. All the documents that we file will be there, and we encourage people that's a great place to look for information, including process information. There's also, I've included the name and email of a process advisor at the National Energy Board. If you have any questions about the process of the NEB proceedings that will happen, that person is very able to help you, and that's what they're there for.
Appreciate that very much, Mr. Chair. I don't know. I have a number of technical questions, and I don't want to take up too much more time here. Maybe I'll ask the questions, and I suspect others will be asking similar questions, and Enbridge may want to.
That's fine.
If I can carry on, then just on the. Obviously, a lot of the questions that we heard from folks, the delegates, and typically you hear all the time, I'm sure, is the corrosive nature of the diluted bitumen that some people feel is the case. And so I just wanted to clarify some of the comments you made. Let's go down a quick list here. You've said there's no sand in the product. There's no increase in pressure or no increase in maximum operating pressure. Those may be two different things. Versus the current pressures in the line. There's no temperature change. The capacity, I think, is changing from whatever it is now to 300,000 barrels per day. I think I read that in the letter that you sent in October. And you said there's no difference in shipping light crude versus diluted bitumen in terms of some of the integrity questions. And there's no additional water in the line, which of course would be a corrosive concern. There's a limit of 0.5% and a limit for sediment and water, which is the corrosive issue, I would think. And I was going to ask about the Kalamazoo experience. You haven't referred to that specifically, the Marshall, Michigan experience. You did say it was not an internal corrosive issue on the pipeline itself, which is good to hear. You mentioned the state-of-the-art control center in Edmonton. So I'm just trying to understand what, if it wasn't the pipe and there's a state-of-the-art control center in Edmonton. What happened in Kalamazoo, or in Marshall, Michigan, rather, and what learnings would we be happy to hear and feel comfortable that you might reflect in your Hamilton or your Line 9 experience. And the last question I had was a different question, Mr. Deputy Mayor, based on Mr. McGreal's earlier question. The Line 10, just understanding the spill that occurred in 2000, which is probably the only spill in the Hamilton area, as far as I know, and any plans for Line 10, which I understand goes down through Buffalo, and any plans, because that would also be a Hamilton issue, Glanbrook, to that end of Hamilton. So sorry, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I thought I'd get all those out and seek some answers to those.
Okay, who would like to take on those questions?
I can address the...
Your name, sir?
I'm sorry, it's Graham White. I'm the Business Communications Manager for Enbridge Pipelines and Liquids. I can speak to the Kalamazoo Marshall incident just because it's something that I have familiarity with, probably more than these people. We have regional people in the U.S. that are certainly the greatest specialists on that particular incident. But the information of it not being corrosive internally is a result of our investigation, but it's also the result of the NTSB investigation. They very clearly stated that it was not an internal corrosion issue. It was obviously an incredibly significant event, not just for the community and for the people that were affected, but for Enbridge as well. We took it obviously very, very seriously. We responded to it. We are still responding to it, as has been detailed, and we certainly don't dispute that. We are in the community of Marshall. We have been since the incident, and we will continue to be, probably forever, but certainly until every single expectation of us has been fulfilled. And what we learned from that incident were tremendous. We had tremendous learnings from that, and it's important also to identify that the NTSB in many cases was referring to much of what Enbridge was leading up to that. And we feel that we were a responsible company leading up to that, and we did dispute some of the findings of the NTSB. Our CEO said that for example, that if we felt that we had information that we should have been addressing the integrity of that pipe, we certainly would have. We feel that the information that we received had some issues, but we, again, take full responsibility. That having been said, we take full responsibility for that incident. And the $800 million, by the way, that is cited as the cost of the spill was our cost. That risk is certainly a risk that is taken by the communities, and we don't deny that. However, we do everything in our power to mitigate that risk and also to assume it financially and any other way that we possibly can when an unfortunate incident like this does occur. The improvements that we've made have been multitudinous. We have made vast improvements in our inline inspection and integrity processes and procedures. We've made improvements in we have not just a better control center and monitoring, but a brand new state-of-the-art, much better control center that's based in Edmonton that 24/7 monitors all of our lines. It has a much better system, softwares, and procedures for detecting all kinds of incidents, but including leaks. We have made improvements and Trevor went over these somewhat, but in terms of this is always evolving technology, so we are always making headway in terms of improving our technology and monitoring to all kinds of features that he was talking about that may need response to, including integrity. We've increased our integrity digs in the area of hundreds of millions of dollars, so that we have much better knowledge of all of our lines, but including Line 9. And we have, and again, we have also very much increased our right-of-way exchange of information with our right-of-way stakeholders, landowners, et cetera, so that they have a much higher awareness and they have a level of knowledge of what a spill looks like, what it smells like, that type of thing. So there have been many measures that we have undertaken to become a better company and a more responsive and a better company since that incident. If there's any specific technical matters, Trevor, you want to?
My name is Scott Ironside. I just wanted to address maybe some of your first questions in regards to operating pressures, characteristics of the crude oils and whatnot. So the pipeline systems are designed and have a tariff limit or maximum on a number of the characteristics you described, such as the temperature, the density of the product, the viscosity, those types of critical things. And so, as was stated earlier, we don't know from a month-to-month basis what the shippers, our customers, are interested in moving crude oil from one place to another. There's trends, of course, and the refineries are able to handle certain types of crude, so we obviously can predict and have trends to understand that. But from time to time, there is opportunity for them to change the crude oil that they are interested in receiving or moving through our system. So when we talk about not changing a temperature or not changing maximum operating pressure, what we're describing is that the system was designed and approved through to our tariffs and specifications, and from time to time we may or may not need to operate the pipeline system at those specification levels. And so when we talk about not requiring a need to change the maximum operating pressure, that's the reality of the operation of the system, is that the previous maximum operating pressure will be maintained regardless of what the customers or our shippers are requiring. And so from a diluted bitumen perspective, the differential between that and any other crude oil, there are a number of information packets. There's which we can provide for you, but there's crude quality information on some websites that can describe to you some of the differences. However, what Trevor was trying to maintain. Sorry, excuse me. So what Trevor was trying to describe is that all of those crude oils have a specification of 0.5% of sediment and water that is a maximum, that if through our testing, if we were to discover that, we would shut out a customer if they were providing something like that to us. And so in those ways, Dilbit is really no different than any other crude oil. They maintain the specifications that we're requiring of our customers to provide to us as we ship the oil.
Councillor McCaddy?
Just a quick follow-up. So the onus is really on the suppliers to the shippers, I guess you use that term, to provide a product to you that meets those kind of standards, the 0.5% solids and moisture being below that. So somebody checks it at their end, obviously, and is there a government check? And then, of course, you would check it as well before it goes into your pipeline. So the due diligence on that, if you could just touch on that, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Sure. So, yes, you're correct. The customer or our shipper would be checking the products that they're moving into our system. We would, in turn, be testing the batch of oil that's coming through from them to us, and we would monitor the quality of that through our systems as well.
And the Montreal refineries, how many are there, and they're all set up to handle Dilbit, are they, Mr. Deputy Mayor?
I'd have to look to Ken probably to answer that.
Deputy Mayor, Councillor McCaddy, to answer your question, there used to be 7 refineries in Montreal East. There's only 1 now. 6 of them have shut down over the past 20 years. It's been somewhat of an economic crisis for the city of Montreal East, as you can imagine, because they've lost some of the best paying jobs they had in that community. This was certainly a topic of discussion when we met with the provincial government in Quebec and with the municipal government in the city of Montreal. The 1 remaining refinery is owned and operated by Suncor. It used to be a Petrocan facility. Suncor purchased Petrocan's assets. The 2nd refinery in the province of Quebec is owned and operated by Ultramar, and as I indicated, is located in Lévis, across the St. Lawrence River from the city of Quebec City. So that the Suncor refinery in Montreal East has a limited capacity to refine heavy crude, which would include, under definition, diluted bitumen. As mentioned, and as you've mentioned to us today, the plan for the capacity of this pipeline, once reversed, is 300,000 barrels a day. A small fraction of that amount could be heavy crude variety, based on the capacity receipt or the capabilities, if you will, of Suncor to take that kind of material. Will there be activities by Suncor to maximize that? Probably, because of the economic viability of doing so.
Suncor can handle it, Ultramar can't.
Ultramar is currently set up to refine offshore crudes that they've been receiving predominantly from the North Sea. So they have been asking us, at this point in time, they have asked us to ship them predominantly light material that's being sourced out of the Bakken Formation in Saskatchewan and North Dakota. So again, to clarify, not from the oil sands.
Right. And then the remaining, if there was remaining shipping going on, it would go down to the U.S. following your pipeline? Is that what would occur?
No. There is absolutely no intention to pursue any exports of oil on the Line 9 reversal project. As was referenced this morning, the Trailbreaker project, which Enbridge did look at in 2008, has been shelved since 2009. Very simple reason for that. Our competitor has looked at a more direct option of shipping Western Canadian crude to the eastern seaboard of the United States. It's called the Keystone Project. It's a project that is currently being debated and is being managed by TransCanada Pipelines. It is no longer economically viable to send crude oil through Montreal to Portland, Maine to return it to Texas. It just doesn't make business sense to do that. All of the oil that we're looking at shipping east on Line 9 is to service the needs of refineries in Quebec.
Mr. Chair, I guess the last question I had was on Line 10. When we heard from Mr. McGreal that there was a spill there in 2000, 2001, and any action on Line 10 then?
Actually, I'm going to defer that question to Mr. Pruger. Mr. Pruger is the supervisor of operations at our Westover facility and was personally involved in responding to that incident.
Morning or good afternoon now. My name is Franz Berger. I'm the area supervisor at Westover. Just to correct Ken, I was not involved directly with that spill, but I am the area supervisor where the spill occurred in. That happened in 2001.
So just wondering, just a quick characteristic of where Line 10 goes. So we know lots about Line 9 now, or we're learning about Line 9. But Line 10, it goes through Glanbrook, Westover, does it, and somehow it ends up down towards Buffalo. And is that light crude, or no one here has talked about Line 10 of that spill? Why that spill happened? If anyone knows here today.
That line runs basically from our station at Westover, which is in Flamborough, and the line runs down through the city of Hamilton, up on top of the mountain, and down towards Buffalo, and we deliver to Tonawanda, to the Cayetone pipeline, which delivers the oil to the United Refinery in Pennsylvania. And there's very different types of crude oil in that. There is some heavy crudes right now that's being delivered down that line.
And should we read heavy crude as diluted bitumen? Are those the two? Are they the same thing?
No, it's just heavy crude from Alberta.
Two different things. So there's no diluted bitumen going through Line 10? Not that I'm aware of. No, and no future plans. I mean, there's no applications before the National Energy Board or anticipated for any changes to Line 10, just to help Mr. McGreal out and our colleagues in Glanbrook.
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I could just say that if the tariff, and I haven't looked at the Line 10 tariff recently, but if the tariff allowed for heavy, then it allows anything that meets those specifications. So, and I don't know what the Line 10 tariff, I haven't looked at it recently.
It could be diluted bitumen. We'd have to you'd have to verify that. Yeah. Okay. And any sense of why that spill happened? Was that a pipeline integrity issue, or does anybody know offhand?
It's Scott Ironside again. I can answer that. So the condition that resulted in the failure there was an external corrosion feature, and it was actually very, very close to a valve along the pipeline.
Fine with that? Okay, thank you, Councillor McCaddy. Now we have Councillors Clark and then Pearson. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to try not to repeat questions. Feel free to say, Brad, we already heard that one, so because it's been a lot of excellent questions from Councillor McCaddy. A moment ago, we had these 3 bottles of lovely liquid passed by. If you could imagine all of the different types of oil lined up, so light crude, all the way through to diluted bitumen, heavy crude, each one of those. Is it the position of Enbridge that all of those different chemical compositions of oil, because they are slightly different in composition, have the exact same corrosivity?
Corrosivity is an interesting word, and certainly in the way that it's being used recently. When we talk about the corrosivity of a crude oil, recall that in many ways, crude oil is used as an anti-corrosive product for carbon steels. Your engine oil, it helps keep the pistons moving, but it also aids in anti-corrosion. So from an oil corrosivity perspective, oil is not corrosive. The potential for corrosion inside a pipeline is related to the water and sediments that may or may not exist, and whether or not they drop out of that product into your pipeline. And so when we talk about the corrosivity of a crude oil, generally speaking, crude oils are non-corrosive. And there are measurements through ASTM standards that are being developed to try and, quantify the corrosivity of that.
So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to be clear, the definition of corrosivity that Enbridge is using is it has to have water and sand in it. I'm talking about the chemical compositions of the different oils. Does the pH, or are they acidic? Does it change in any way, shape, or form? I know in our sewer system, we have to be very careful what exactly is going through our sewer system, because if we change the pH just slightly, it starts to eat away our pipes. So I'm trying to understand. I understand about water and sand, and I don't think anyone around here would say, well, yeah, that's not corrosive. We all know it is. The differences in chemical compositions. Is there a difference in chemical composition that can cause, over time, a change in the integrity of the pipe?
So at the temperatures we operate at and the conditions we operate under, all of the crude oils have what I would say is a similar corrosivity.
And does the temperature change on your pipe?
The temperature, the act of moving the oil by increasing pressure at a pump station, the friction of the fluid moving down the pipeline does create heat, and there is a heat loss associated with the movement of the oil. So yes, there is an increase and decrease of the temperature of the crude oil as it moves down the system. All what we would call marginal amounts, we're talking 5-10 degrees Celsius change, 5-10 degrees variation that you might see Celsius.
So, and again, my understanding, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I guess I'm going to use the term viscosity of the different oil products. Each one would move down the pipe in different ways. So if you have to heat it up to make it move smoother, that's when you would heat it? Or is it friction of the oil?
In fact, it's just the natural action of moving the oil. We don't have heating as a tool to reduce the viscosity of the oil.
Your tariff that you would have with the National Energy Board would indicate the maximum pressure that's allowable, operating pressure, for each particular refined product. So does it change for each type? For example, light crude or heavy crude, you would have a higher pressure to push that through in a heavier crude?
No. So the tariff, the agreement with the National Energy Board through the application of the facility would have a single maximum operating pressure defined for that pipe. and then whatever the crude or product is being moved through it would have to be within that limitation. So it's not going to be a crude or a product-specific maximum operating pressure.
So when I'm thinking of a thicker material moving through the pipe and you have a maximum operating pressure and you cannot exceed that, if you were now using a much thinner crude, would you not be shipping a lot more volume through that pipe if you were maxing it?
Fundamental hydraulics, yes. So absolutely that would be the case. Yeah.
So if you're bouncing around, and forgive me for asking these questions because I'm trying to understand how these breaks happen. And one of the variables that seem to be confusing to me is if you're operating pressure is say 500 cubic per meters cubed or kilograms per meter cubed for one particular product, and now your maximum is much higher, and you're shipping that lighter crude at the maximum height or volume and pressure, isn't there more risk of an explosive failure when you have something that's not going to gum up, it's just going to go blow if it breaks open?
There was a lot of question in there. I think
my understanding is you deliver the crude based on what your customers or the oil based on what your customers are wanting.
Correct.
So in any specific day, could you be moving around the product in terms of whether or not it's a higher viscosity or lower viscosity oil, or do you just ship it? 1 week we're shipping light crude, the next week we're shipping something else. How does it work?
Sure. So how it works is, and as I said earlier, we would schedule the pipeline based off the nominations process, and we would schedule the pipeline out on a monthly basis. And generally speaking, we would have what we call batches of crude that would be generally in the order of 10,000 cubic meters. And depending on the diameter of the pipe, that could be 4 or 5 miles in length. So you have 4 or 5 miles of the same crude type. And so that, generally speaking, we line up our pipeline system to have like commodities in them for reasons like you described, to maintain consistent pressures required to move the crude.
You're not making any dramatic shifts from one product to a light crude. My concern is if you're pumping at maximum at light crude and now you switch it to the heavier crude, that's going to put significant torque and stress on the entire system.
So to answer that, generally speaking, we keep the crudes of a similar type on that line. Now, there can be examples where we may go to certain refineries and switch to another refinery that requires a heavier crude. So there is a potential for moving a number of batches of a lighter product. For quality control purposes, we prefer not to have a heavy lined up with a very light crude because there's intermixing and there's crude quality issues to manage. So normally we would have a light mixed matched up with a medium or something of that nature. So exactly, so you keep your.
You're never really mixing a light, shipping a light one day and then a heavy the next day. It's going to be feathered through, so there's a gradual change.
That's the normal program, yeah.
Okay. I was interested in my last line of questions, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I was interested in hearing that you've had 15 inlines. I'm using your terms, not my term. So far on Pipeline 9. And I believe I heard that it would be a number of months before you get the results of those fancy tests back. Do you have an idea how long it'll take for those results to come back? Because you haven't done any excavation work yet because you don't know what's going on in the pipeline yet. Is that a fair statement?
It's close. So we do know what's going on in the pipeline from previous inline inspections. So these aren't the first set of inspections. We've been inspecting Line 9 since the late 70s. Yeah, the late 70s, with various technologies as they've developed through the decades. So the recent inspections, as Trevor stated, were completed in the past few months. The amount of data that's collected in these inspections is very large. The analysis process that the inline inspection vendors go through is very elaborate and deliberate. They will go through and assess on a millimeter by millimeter basis the condition of the pipeline, and they would then report that back to us. So some technologies have a shorter time frame to do the analysis. So Trevor mentioned we have a magnetic flux leakage is a technology that measures corrosion. Those reports generally come quicker. And the ultrasonic tools, they typically take a little bit longer time. So we have received some of those reports. They're going through our internal processes right now for evaluation of what the tools have seen. And as Trevor mentioned, some of the digs will be starting in January.
I'm just going to use an analogy, Mr. Deputy Mayor. A friend of mine was getting an MRI for nasty headaches, and he was told it was going to take 3 months before he got the results from a specialist. His statement was, hell, I could be dead before they tell me what's wrong. If it's going to take that many months to find out what's going on in the pipeline, then how isn't there a risk of a breach to the pipeline if it takes you 3 months to sort out which pipes you're going to excavate? Like, I don't understand that process.
So the timing of doing the inspections is something that we wouldn't leave until the last minute. So as I said earlier, we have previous inspections on the pipeline. And so really this is an updating of that information. And so
there's no risk in change from one inspection to the other?
Certainly there is, and that's why we do the re-inspection. So the planning for those re-inspections, though, depending on the type of inspection that's being done, is designed to happen long before any of the known features in the pipeline would become critical at operating pressures.
How would you know if there's a major fault?
A major fault?
Oh, something's wrong. You're doing these assessments 3 months before you actually find out what's going on. How do you, I'm sorry, I'm having a rough time figuring this one out.
So based on the previous inspections, we would do...
Fine. You just said the last ones were fine. So now this is a new round, and an inspection result indicates there's a fine fault in the pipe that could potentially grow. And it's not going to be for 3 months before you know?
So we would time the inspections based on modeling of particular flaw growth rates. So for example, if there's known corrosion feature, we would model the rate at which it would be growing, and we would time our inspections to ensure that the inspections happen before that corrosion would become critical at the operating pressure.
Section of the community is based on computer modeling as opposed to real time.
Well, it's more than just computer modeling. There's a lot of engineering and analysis that goes into it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Deputy Mayor, can I ask something for the record? In a previous meeting, one of my colleagues had indicated that Enbridge had met with the majority, if not all, of the councillors. I don't meet with lobbyists. I never have met with lobbyists. They did not meet with me, and I don't think Councillor Pearson met with them either. Thank you.
I think it's unanimous that they didn't meet with anyone, but okay.
I'm just curious because one of our colleagues said they met with everyone or most of us, so that's a complete change from what the guy from Ancaster.
Comment on that, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I approached all of council via telephone and or email offering to meet. I met with 5 councillors.
Okay, so we do. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, so now we have Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and certainly appreciate all the presenters today and the information. And I may be touching on a question that I think we've tried to get an answer before, but I think goes back to, and you've raised it again, and we keep talking about the pipeline system that's closely monitored, the state-of-the-art controls. Can you explain exactly what these state-of-the-art controls entail? And the reason I'm asking is, I know like our Horizon utilities, they can tell, they have a whole grid. If you go into the cockpit at Horizon, you have the whole grid of the City of Hamilton. They can tell when blackouts happen in what quadrant. Is this a similar system that Enbridge works with? Could you explain explain that?
So I would preface my comments with I'm not part of our control center group. However, I'll answer generally, and if we have to get additional information from that group, we can do so. What you described is similar to what we have in our control center in a sense that we have monitors established where our operators are continually monitoring the pipeline system. And what they're monitoring is, among other things, the operating pressure in the pipe at various locations along the pipeline. They're monitoring the flow rates of the oil at various locations along the pipeline, and they're also monitoring the density of the density of the crude oil that's moving down each individual pipeline. So. Using that, they can evaluate where each batch is along the pipeline system so that we can monitor what goes into different tankage and different facilities. They're also monitoring at our terminal facilities the levels of oil in each tank and all of the various elements of operating a terminal.
Thank you. And also wanted to ask then, so you have the centralized in Edmonton, you have your systems through, and I'm assuming it's a system that goes through the pipes, just as some of the photographs here show, sort of tunneling through or equipment that goes through the pipelines, and that's how you gather your information, I'm assuming, correct?
From an integrity perspective, that's correct. So those tools that you see pictures of, those are inserted into the pipeline at specific locations where we have those types of facilities, and that tool then travels through the pipeline collecting data. Once that tool is received at another facility to be removed from the pipeline, it's then downloaded and analyzed with the ILI vendor.
So in a scenario involving our area in Hamilton and the pipeline proposal, reversal and proposal through the Hamilton section, what's the timelines if this is closely monitored on a 24-hour basis? What's the timelines if there is an incident of response in this location? Are there representatives on site within certain jurisdictions at all times?
I'll maybe pass that to Franz.
We have crews set up right across our eastern region. We have crews in Sarnia, at Westover, and Belleville, and in Montreal. We have all our equipment. We have equipment stationed at Westover, which is all in the city of Hamilton. We have our crews that are on 24/7 on-call and on a pager system, so that they respond immediately if there was an incident.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I guess I just want to ask one question. I know part of it was answered, so no, I think that was answered. I thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you for those. But I would, if I could preface, so is it possible to get more information on the control center group and how that works from Edmonton at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. I can provide really whatever information that you require.
I'd appreciate it, and I think it would be appropriate for all of Council to get that, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Now we have Councillor Pasuda.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Marula, and welcome, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you for coming out. A few issues here I want to bring up. You're doing integrity digs on line 10. Here I have a folder, and I keep getting all of the information from through clerks here and Enbridge Pipelines from Jasper Avenue, Edmonton, and through the Grand River Conservation. You're asking for permission to do the dig. Conservation is quite involved in getting when you have. And I have been to several farms where you've been doing the. Been there, seen the side of the trench. When you find a weak spot in a pipe, are they usually on the outside or the inside?
Generally speaking, the weak spot, if you will, is going to be an external corrosion feature. So where there may be water accessing the external surface of the pipe and creating some corrosion there. Or it's potentially a pre-existing flaw in the long seam weld. And I use the term flaw, not necessarily a defect. What the tools are identifying is a location where there's a potential for a defect to exist. And so that would be visually for someone to go and look at the site, you may see absolutely nothing. But as Trevor described, we have non-destructive testing methods to assess the pipe long seam to assess a particular flaw that may exist. So generally speaking, that's the type of thing that you're looking at in Line 10.
And Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'm getting a little techie here, and I hope somebody can answer it. If not, so when you excavate a weak spot in the pipe, potentially weak spot with air or maintain, you're going to put a sleeve on this. You're going to weld a sleeve on top of this. How do you prepare that surface between? So, and I know a little bit about welding and machine shop stuff. So you've got a pipe. You've exposed it to repair it, to do some maintenance work on it. How do you prepare that pipe, the pipeline that's there now, before you put the sleeve on?
The process would be to sandblast the surface of the pipe, and therefore cleaning all contaminants and everything off of that surface. The sleeve is then going to be fully welded onto the pipeline. So there's really no other preparation required of the pipe that's being covered, given that this sleeve itself would be pressure containing. So in the event that it was an internal type flaw that could potentially grow, if the sleeve were ever pressurized, it would contain pressure in the pipeline. So the only other thing I would add is the areas where the pipe is being welded, or sorry, the sleeve is being welded onto, those are examined with non-destructive testing methods to ensure that the weld is being put over a good surface.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, can continue. So we had a presenter here today comment that the greater pressure from the oil, 40 to 70 times more the viscosity in the heavy.
So when you go from a light crude to a heavy crude, definitely a heavy crude is more viscous. That's fact. But as described earlier, the maximum operating pressure that the pipeline is designed for doesn't change. So if the lighter crude is being moved through the pipeline at that pressure, you're simply going to have more fluid passing through the pipeline than you would with a higher viscous crude oil.
So once again, a little techie here. So a medium, you had samples go around, a medium crude. At what pressure would that be moving through pipeline 9B?
Well, once again, typically, depending on the requirements of the shippers, we would typically run the line at or near its maximum pressure, regardless of what the crude oil is. Now, it may be that the capacity or the actual volumes that the shippers require allows us to reduce the operating pressure, but it's simply for a functional need as opposed to a desired reduction.
A leak or a break. What's your response for the area around Westover through Hamilton, Flamborough? What would your response be? How is that? How do you have that set up to respond to a break or a leak?
So I'll defer that to Franz.
So in the event that a leak has been detected, and there's many ways to detect a leak through our control center, through the public. So once the call will go into our control center, and the control center shuts down the section of pipe immediately, shuts down the pipeline and sectionalizes and closes the valves. When that happens, then the calls go out to our regional office in Sarnia, who has somebody on call 24/7. They make the call to myself in the Westover area, and at that point we dispatch crews to verify that there is a leak. We get odor calls quite often, and they typically don't. There are nothing. Or possibly a gas leak or whatever, somebody's house or whatever. But so we have to verify that a leak has occurred. A lot of times you can tell, the control center can tell just by operating the line that whether it is a leak or whatever. But we'll verify it. We'll also at that point call in all the crews to come to Westover to pick up all the equipment, as well as we'll be calling emergency response contractors that we have on retainers as well to assist with the response. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to contain it. And then once we've contained it, then we're going to start cleaning it up.
That. And one more question, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Do you or have you ever provided security or a bond to any municipality for pipelines running through properties? Mayor?
So yeah, not that we're aware of, but we would not do that. But I mean, and again, when you look at the costs that we have put out for cleanup in our incidents in the past, we've always had the resources to provide whatever it takes in terms of money or whatever else to respond to that.
So Enbridge takes full responsibility, does not cost municipality any dollars whatsoever for cleanup? Securities, things like that?
Yeah, that's correct. And in fact, if you go to the communities, including Marshall, where this event has happened, that they can confirm that.
Okay.
However, I mean, the cost, that's monetarily. There's other costs, of course.
Thank you.
All right. Now we have Councillor Partridge.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and a lot of good questions around the horseshoe today. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming in. It's a good presentation, and I've certainly had my eyes opened. I've learned a lot today. I'm not going to repeat the questions that have been asked, but I just have one, and I listened very carefully to all the questions and the answers, so forgive me if I've missed this. But could you please explain the process? I understand from what I heard before that your schedules for shipping the crude through the pipeline are done on a monthly basis. Is that correct, through you, Deputy Mayor?
That's correct. Typically, our shippers will nominate how many batches and the volume of each of the batches for the next month.
Okay, thank you. And just to further clarify, I understood that you would ship the same type of crude, the batches, all together in one line. So if you were shipping light, it would be just light within a certain line over a period of time. Is that correct?
So once all the batches or all the nominations have been received for the next month, we look at that series of nominations and try to best logistically keep the viscosities the same for operational performance, as well as we have to work with each of our shippers to make sure they've got the tankage and the capacity to also blend into the big scheme. So they not only need volumes, but they need volumes at a certain rate in a certain sequence so that they can meet their product needs as well.
All right, thank you. So at what point or is there ever a change when you've shipped for, a certain volume of, let's say, light crude oil? If you were then to go to a medium or a heavy crude, would it be shipped in that same pipeline in a different schedule? And if it is could you explain the process for any cleaning so that there isn't kind of a contamination from one crude to another?
Certainly all the products, we're talking about one pipeline. So on Line 9, it ships a series of different products to 3 different end destinations. And so those 3 end destinations have individual requirements. They don't each take one product. They'll take a series of mixed products as well. So they're all going down the same pipeline. Some of our products, they have what they call batch pigs, which is a physical separator between one product and the next product. Other products you are able to maintain a minimum interstitial mix of the products in the line and can ship them sequentially, and there's very little blend or transition in the pipeline.
All right. Thank you very much for that explanation. I appreciate it. And I think that was probably the one question that I did not hear asked. And thank you for the answer.
One comment I want to feedback, just because I'm up here at the moment, but I'm not sure we were fully clarified the one question. Even with viscosity, that is one of the parameters that's in the specification on the lines. So you have to keep all the products you're going to ship within not only a product quality from the point of view of 0.5% solids and water mixture, as well as other properties, but one of those other properties is viscosity. So there is a tolerance for what viscosity can be from the heaviest to the lightest. So the heaviest has to be brought up to a certain viscosity to allow it to be shippable. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Partridge. There are no further questions, so I have a motion, but I thank you very much for your input. Councillor McCaddy. You can move your motion now or later. We're going to break now and perhaps do that later, but yeah. It's up to you.
Sorry, Councillor Marula, or Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just in my motion, which I think, Ken, I shared a copy with you, there were 3 questions or requests for information from Enbridge. I probably should have just asked those here, or just maybe verified whether those are questions that we can ask. And the first one was the results of the pipeline integrity digs conducted on Line 9 in Flamborough. The second one is how Enbridge can assist on monitoring drinking water wells in the Line 9 pipeline area. And the third was the emergency response plan in case of a spill. I think Councillor Pasuta touched on that third one. So we had planned on asking you those questions via this motion. So I don't know if you wanted to touch on any of those today, or just maybe we'll just go ahead and do that if you don't mind, and you'll get a letter from us, I guess, Mr. Deputy Mayor, asking those questions formally. Is that appropriate, Ken?
Yes, Councillor McCaddy, that would be appreciated. The formal request will be dealt with.
Let's go ahead and do that later on, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCaddy. No further speakers. I appreciate your time. Moved by Partridge, second by Pasuta, that we received the presentation. All in favor? Carried. Now, before we go to break, we're going to have an issue this afternoon. No, we can't. I have a speaking engagement at Delta High School for 1:30. We are at a bare quorum now at 9. We've been in and out of quorum all day. So the issue is this. I have a speaking engagement at 1:30. I have Cable 14 that's been scheduled. All of this was scheduled prior to this meeting being scheduled. Having said that, we're going to have an issue. This meeting probably, inevitably, might be canceled because others are suggesting they have to leave as well. So, Madam Clerk, could you just verify that everyone that committed here today is here today?
Sorry, through the chair, the meeting can continue as long as we have a quorum. Once we lose quorum, the meeting will be either recessed to continue at another time or adjourned.
Okay, now I will be returning after the Cable 14 commitment, so hopefully we can retain quorum until that point. So we're going to break now. We lose quorum if we. I must leave for the speaking engagement, but Councillor Morelli must leave as well. So we need to break now to try to regroup. Come back in let's say a half an hour.
Okay.
I move to cancel Councillor Marula's appointments.
Well, see, the problem is it's Delta High School. It's a group of students. A speaking engagement. I've already canceled once. I think.
I move to take a break.
Okay, moved by Partridge, seconded by Patina. All in favor? Carried.
How long, Mr. Deputy Mayor? We used to half an hour.
Time to form another committee. All right.
Just in regards to just the change in pressure that could be created according to the type of oil that's going through the line, because that seems to be the gist of what councillors were asking about and that sort of thing. So could you just clarify? Just clarify any potential issues that might arise from that?
I'm not sure what you mean by issues. I mean,
Okay.
as described.
No, I'm phrasing my question terribly. You heard the presentation, the concerns about the difference in pressure that could be created in the line should this reversal happen. Could you just summarize for me what your rebuttal is to that?
Sure. So the change in operating pressure is really non-existent. The maximum operating pressure of the pipeline is not being changed as part of the reversal project. So effectively, there's really no change when we talk about the maximum operating pressures that the pipeline will see.
Okay, and there's no chance of that changing then?
No, that's a licensed maximum operating pressure as per our regulations. So we have no intention of raising the maximum operating pressure.
Now, could you also, Scott, speak to a contingency plan that's in place should there be a break on the line, or would that be someone else?
That's probably for Franz or someone else to answer. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And Scott, what is your title with Enbridge?
I'm the director of our pipeline integrity programs.
Thank you. Just stand a little bit concerns about a potential break in the line. So could you speak to what would happen if there was a break?
The first thing that we do is everything we possibly can to ensure there isn't any kind of an incident. But if there is, we have a very sophisticated state-of-the-art monitoring center in Edmonton that monitors all of our lines, including Line 9. They would respond immediately in terms of shutting down the line, shutting down the valves that feed the line. They can do that within minutes, so that we can assess the area and make sure that it actually is a leak. We need to respond all the way down to our regional people who are dispatched, and they can do this very, very quickly. They have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week on-call schedule where they are able to visually confirm there is a leak. Sometimes our monitoring center can confirm that themselves, in which case we just immediately dispatch the resources that we have regionally along the line to respond to the incident in whatever way that we need to, so with whatever resources that we need to.
But we heard of some incidents like the one in Michigan and the one in Binbrook where it took several hours to respond to a break.
Well, hopefully, and again, we've come a long way as a company in terms of our emergency response and our capacity and our speed of response. We're always improving. That's in terms of any incident, especially along Line 9, very confident. In fact, we've proven with some recent incidents that we do respond very quickly and effectively to contain and then to stay in that region until it is completely cleaned up.
Is there any other sort of misinformation on this issue that you want to clear up for people? Just on some of the discussion that's been happening in Hamilton.
Like on Line 9 in general?
Yes.
Yes, I mean, some of the misconceptions, I think, and maybe as a company that we take this somewhat, the product of what we transport, we're so familiar with it, that we need to look at how people are categorizing or looking at various types of crude. Crude is crude, essentially, so we don't make as much a differentiation between that product, but it is, but I think it's important for people to realize that we have been transporting this for decades on our transmission lines, that we're very good at what we do, that we are improving all the time, and that we have very high commitments to the communities through which these products flow, and we'll continue to.
Can you say your name and your title?
It's Graham White, and I'm a spokesperson for Enbridge, but manager of communications.
Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot.